Hi everyone. For those of you that don't know us very well at the moment, I'm the CEO, Lynn Minot, and I set Thyroid UK up about 25 years ago. I started working on the campaigning. And what we do is we provide information and resources to promote effective diagnosis and appropriate treatment for people that haven't been diagnosed yet, and also for people who have been diagnosed, because there are a lot of issues. It's not just as easy as taking a pill. It really isn't. There are a lot of barriers to getting treatment and barriers to actually getting the right treatment as well. So some of you may not be aware that we have a website which has a lot of information, and we have an online community called Health Unlocked. And on there, a couple of weeks ago, we hit 150,000 members. We are the largest community on Health Unlocked, and possibly anywhere else as well. We have a Facebook page that is quite busy, an X page, and an Instagram page where we put lots of posts on about various issues or news, information, things like that. So this year, the topic for the Thyroid Awareness Week is nutrition, which is good because this is something that I am very keen on people knowing about, because without good nutrition, your thyroid can't work properly. So it could be possible that if you're not diagnosed yet, just looking at your nutrition values, your vitamin D, B12, magnesium, zinc, those kind of things can make a huge difference. But it can also make a huge difference to how you feel when you're on treatment, and also whether you take them at the right time, because some of them you shouldn't be taking at the same time as your levothyroxine. So we're really pleased that it's about nutrition this time. So we've got some speakers who are nutritionists, and also a therapist that deals with mindfulness, which I always think is very helpful. Our first speaker is Aggie McCabe, and I can see that she's there now. Aggie is a registered nutritional therapist specialising in thyroid disorders. Some of you may already know her. She has spoken at previous webinars for us, and she's a regular writer for our member magazine, Harmony. And I'm really looking forward to hear what she's got to say. She's going to let us all know about the Gut-Thyroid Connection. And this is something that I'm very keen for people to know about, because more and more research is showing that the gut has a lot to do with various issues in our body. And again, it's tied to nutrition and the microbiome, and how people are not getting enough proper vitamins and minerals, etc., into their system. You know, we can all be eating quite well, but we're not getting the vitamins and minerals. You know, our food is so processed these days, and we don't really have time to cook or bake as much as we'd like to. Certainly for me, my husband is always moaning that I don't make cakes anymore because I don't really have time. And yet making our own cakes is just one simple way of not having all the processing chemicals and things like that that make the food last so long. You know, that's why the food lasts so long a lot of the time, because it's got chemicals in it to make it last. So nowadays, when I look at something, if it's got a very long eat before or something, I just think, oh God, how much has that got in it? And sometimes you can have a look at the label and there's just so much chemicals in everything. So Aggie, are you happy to start a little bit earlier? hopefully.
Yeah, I
This will
think so.
go.
Let's go for it, because we can also, depending how many questions we are going to have, I can see some of my some of my clients here. Depending how many questions we have, we can
Yeah.
extend the Q&A or
Yeah.
something.
Okay.
Yeah, shall I
Thank you.
share my screen? I'm very excited to talk to you about this, because just like Lynn was saying, it's such an important conversation, and unfortunately we don't get enough information on all of this from primary care, which is a shame. But there is so much that we can do. We can educate ourselves and really make a difference, by making small changes to how we eat, how we live, without it taking over our lives as well. So let me see if I can you see that? Lynn, can you tell me if you can see that?
Yep, that's fine.
You can see the first slide, right?
Can, yeah.
Okay, so what I will talk to you about today is the bidirectional gut-thyroid relationship, which is basically how the gut affects your thyroid and how your thyroid affects your gut. I'll share the newest clinical insights covering gut permeability, leaky gut, you might have heard it called leaky gut, dysbiosis, which are basically changes to your microbiome, inflammation, and something called vagus nerve, which is very important from the nervous system perspective, and I really wanted to touch on that. But I also share some practical healing strategies that you can implement yourself and discuss with your practitioner. So without further ado, just a little bit about me. Lynn has already kindly shared a bit, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Aggie McCabe, and I'm a functional nutritionist specializing in thyroid conditions. But I'm also a somatic therapist. I work with the nervous system a lot, and I've got over a decade of professional experience supporting women with thyroid conditions. So that's all I do. Hashimoto's, Graves, hypothyroidism, hyper, all of that, bread and butter. And I also have a history of Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism myself, and I've been in full remission for over 8 years. But I 100% fully get how you're feeling, where you are, all the frustrations. So what I want you to understand first, before we go any further with this presentation, is that gut imbalances are the root cause and driver of thyroid conditions. And what I mean by root cause, it's that it's one of the triggers of thyroid conditions, especially those of autoimmune origin, like Hashimoto's. You might have heard of Hashimoto's, Graves, behind 80 to 90% of all thyroid conditions. But it's also a key driver of imbalances and symptoms. Your thyroid doesn't operate in isolation, and it's part of that broader inner ecosystem. So things like your immune system, your nervous system, your nutrient status, like Lynn was saying, your stress response, and really your gut health is what determines how your thyroid functions, whether we can convert what our antibodies are doing, what your TSH is doing. And definitely it all affects your symptoms. So when this ecosystem is disrupted, your thyroid suffers. But when we can restore it, the thyroid really can thrive, and can be optimized without more medication necessarily. So that we've got this bidirectional relationship. Imbalances of your thyroid affect the gut, and imbalances of the gut affect the thyroid. And when they're both struggling, we've got that little bit of that vicious loop happening. So how thyroid dysfunction disrupts the gut? Low thyroid hormone can slow your gut motility, which means that basically everything in your gut moves slower. And that can show up as constipation and bloating, sometimes even like a bit of pain, IBS-like symptoms. It also creates conditions so that the fact that your thyroid is imbalanced affects your microbiome, so the bacteria in your gut, which can lead to dysbiosis, so like an imbalance of this bacteria, and things like SIBO. Some of you might have heard this, which is small intestine bacterial overgrowth, that is so common in thyroid conditions. It also reduces stomach acid and digestive enzyme activity. So you might be eating food, but it's actually not being digested properly. And also, really important, we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail, it weakens the gut wall, causing something called leaky gut. So some of you might have heard of this. And please, as I'm talking, I'm not going to be checking for the questions, but if you can pop any questions in the chat so I can answer them in the Q&A. So we've got this unfortunate gut thyroid loop where this dysbiosis, leaky gut, the microbiome issues, everything that's going on in your gut causes immune activation and low-level inflammation. That can lead to higher thyroid antibodies, which can lead to reduced thyroid hormones, and then stomach motility, everything slows down, which causes even more of these imbalances, and the loop closes. And that's why it's so important that we learn how to interrupt it. So what are the key clinical insights? What do we know? And this is all deeply rooted in very good research. So this is not just insights from my practice, although everything that I'm talking about, I've seen and supported clients with, is something that I definitely, got a lot of proof of in the actual clinical setting. But all of these findings are rooted in research, and under pretty much most slides, I have also linked some research studies. So for the nerdy ones amongst us, if you want to take a little look, you can even click on it and have a look at the paper if you want to find out a little bit more. But gut permeability, leaky gut, what is it, why it matters? So your gut wall is held together by something called tight junctions. They are like little gates that control what enters the bloodstream from your gut. And when they break down, when they kind of open a little bit, all sorts of things seep into your bloodstream. So things like undigested food particles, for example, bacterial fragments, endotoxins enter the bloodstream. And what that does is it causes your immune system to go on high alert, causing that systemic inflammation. And this situation is also one of the prerequisites, one of the factors that need to be present for autoimmunity to develop. And as we know today, over 90% of cases of hyper and hypo are caused by autoimmunity. So if you're here and you have hypothyroidism, it is very, very, very likely, pretty much 9 out of 10 cases are caused by Hashimoto's, and it's very similar numbers for Graves'. And I've created this little slide here so you can see what I mean, because it's really important to understand this. This is like a nice and sealed barrier. We've got the inside of your gut and nothing is seeping through to the bloodstream. And here we can see how the tight junctions are loosened, and all sorts of particles that shouldn't be there suddenly start leaking into your bloodstream, and your body sees that as threat. It sees that as an invader, and it starts attacking it, creating immune activation, which causes systemic inflammation. So what drives gut permeability in thyroid conditions? So that dysbiosis, so loss of bacteria that maintain the gut wall. So we've got certain species that are not present, but we also have overgrowth of the bacteria, pathological bacteria that shouldn't be there, or even, imbalances in the commensal strains that should be there, but just exist in different quantities. That low-grade inflammation, low thyroid hormone, as we said, directly weakens tight junction integrity. But also things like chronic stress and elevated cortisol. And, this condition in itself is very much associated with a lot of chronic stress, a lot of frustration, lack of support. All of this creates that low-grade chronic stress that we are not necessarily always equipped to deal with. Another important thing to mention is the hormone conversion issue. So you might be aware that the T4 that you are taking in the form of levothyroxine, which is the most commonly used, of course, medication for hypo in the UK at least, it needs to be converted by the body to be effective, to be usable by the body. And 20% of that conversion, which is quite, a fifth, it's quite a large chunk, happens in the gut wall. So if you think about it, if the environment in the gut is compromised, if we're dealing with leaky gut and the dysbiosis, inflammation, that conversion is affected. And if you lose 20% of your conversion, that might put you in suboptimal or even deficient ranges for T3. And like Lynn mentioned, we also have nutrient problems. So the gut microbiome governs absorption of every nutrient that thyroid needs. So things like selenium and iodine and zinc and iron, all of these need to be absorbed by the gut. And if the gut is compromised, that will not happen. So just briefly, selenium, essential for conversion, also zinc, conversion, but also immune function. Iron, we need it for the TPO enzyme function, which is a very important peroxidase enzyme. And iodine is absorbed in the GI tract. And although we don't want to be, for example, supplementing or iodine, especially with Hashimoto's, we do need a minimum amount every single day for our thyroid hormones to be made. So this inflammation here is the inflammation systemic, but also inflammation in the gut. And chronic low-grade inflammation drives the thyroid-gut loop. So what happens is when the inflammation is high, that damages the gut wall further, worsens the leaky gut, activates the immune system. So then we're dealing with this whole body inflammation, raises antibody production, also impacts the conversion, and suppresses some of that vagal tone that I'm going to talk about. So this is another really important finding from research, but also I see that literally, every time I do a stool test with clients, a lot of the inflammatory markers are elevated. And a lot of the symptoms that my clients report to me, which again indicate that gut, but also systemic inflammation, you might be familiar with those symptoms of feeling like you're a bit off, you're coming down with something, but actually nothing is happening. Perhaps you're waking up in the morning feeling exhausted, almost like this hangover, like brain foggy feeling. All of that is an indication of low-grade systemic inflammation that can be rooted in your gut. So for most people with thyroid conditions, but to be honest, general population as well, but especially for us, because we're dealing with all those other issues like leaky gut, for example, the key drivers of inflammation, unfortunately for some of us that love bread, but gluten is really one of the key drivers. It does have this interesting relationship with the thyroid, and I'm not going to go into too many scientific details, so this is hugely simplified. But the idea here is that gluten structure resembles thyroid structure. So when we're dealing with leaky gut, gluten particles can lead into the bloodstream. Our body gets confused between the gluten and the thyroid, starts attacking the gluten and thyroid at the same time. So this is why when we eat a lot of gluten with thyroid conditions, we can have the worsening of the symptoms. Other things, none of it will be a surprise to you. Things like ultra-processed foods, blood sugar dysregulation, heavy metals, environmental toxins. Of course, we are all exposed to a lot of that right now. But also things like, sleep deprivation, overtraining, and chronic infections. For example, Helicobacter pylori, which is a bacteria you might have heard of. It's responsible for a lot of stomach ulcers. So that is, GPs are actually very happy to test for it. But this bacteria has a direct link to autoimmune thyroid disease. So it's something both in Graves and Hashimoto's, super prevalent. And I highly recommend that everyone tests for it because your GP will test if you ask, which is very handy. You don't need to do like an expensive functional test for that. And let me just check the time. Okay, we're doing well. Another thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the findings is that nervous system loop with the thyroid. And I want to introduce you to the concept of the vagus nerve that you might have heard of. There's been quite a lot of noise about it on social media and in media in general. So vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in the body. It turns off your fight or flight response. So really important because it basically helps us to get out of this constant activation back into regulation. But it does something else, which is really interesting and important for the gut. So it connects the brain with the gut and it collects the information from the whole body, including the gut, and sends it to the brain. So almost 80% of the signals all travel upwards. So all the information from the gut, what is going on, sending upwards to the brain. And it runs this active anti-inflammatory pathway. So it's actively reducing your inflammation. And what research also shows us is that when that vagus nerve is functioning well, we see reduced gut permeability and better microbiome diversity. So you can see how this is a potential little tool for us because we can work with nervous system, we can work with the gut, we can improve our stress resilience. We can't necessarily always reduce stress, but we can change how we respond to it, right? So it's a really nice tool for us here to help with permeability, with microbiome, without necessarily only relying on things like probiotics. Interesting thing that we see also in research is that when we see hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism, what also exists is a suppressed vagal tone. So we see there is a relationship there between the thyroid and the nervous system again, and that low vagal tone, very, very common, not just in overactive thyroid, but in underactive also, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate. I always talk about chronic stress and the impact of thyroid conditions on our mental health, trauma, and it's always well received. I think a lot of us can relate, especially when we think about, like, years before the diagnosis and how perhaps our life looked like, what perhaps could have been a trigger. And also thyroid condition, like I said earlier, in itself is very dysregulating for the nervous system. It causes additional everyday stress. Okay, so you're probably wondering, okay, these are all very interesting clinical findings, but what I can actually do about it every day. So let's talk about that. So what you can start doing straight away is feeding your protective bacteria. So instead of just taking a probiotic and calling it a day, actually adding beneficial, just like Lynn was saying, beneficial foods to your everyday menu that can give your bacteria what they need to thrive, and they have this amazing ability to rebalance. So we don't need to necessarily be using very dramatic interventions. If you give the bacteria what they need, a lot of it will come back to balance. You can also use targeted probiotics. So sometimes we need them. I'm not a huge fan of just taking a probiotic every single day and that's it, because we don't, like, again, our microbiome doesn't need that. But sometimes I recommend twice a year doing like a targeted protocol with specific strains of probiotics can be amazingly supportive. You can also take steps to lower inflammation, right? So now you're a little bit more aware that perhaps that is part of the broader picture of that terrain for you, of that environment in the body. We can take a lot of steps to lower that inflammation. And also, finally, as I was saying earlier, we can do a lot to support the nervous system, support that vagal tone, and use that pathway to support your gut and your thyroid at the same time. But also, for some of you here, you might be considering working with a practitioner, someone like myself, right? So there is a lot that we can do in a clinical setting, especially for those of you who identify that you do have a lot of gut issues alongside of your typical thyroid symptoms, right? So if there is a little bit of a deeper problem or symptoms that don't improve after you've done this, then it makes sense to perhaps, work with a practitioner like myself on things like healing gut permeability, SIBO investigation, functional testing. We can do quite a lot of tests to find out what exactly is going on, and receiving like a bit more personalized, tailored protocol. We work a lot in functional medicine with like different phases of gut rebuilding, microbiome restoration. Again, not absolutely everyone needs it, but if you're someone who really identifies that as a problem, perhaps something to consider. So thing number one you can do, feed your protective bacteria. Diversity of what you eat will make the biggest difference. I am a huge fan of meal planning, but in a joyful way. So we don't want to stress ourselves out, right? So we look at the week, look at the days, and you can put it on a piece of paper, you can put it in notes on your phone, and just decide what sort of things, more or less at least, you are going to be eating. Using similar recipes and not trying to reinvent the wheel every single week really helps, but aiming for 20 to 30 different plant foods per week is ideal. So obviously we're wanting to favor veggies, and especially everything that's green, anything that's bitter, like we've got asparagus now, for example, like rucola, all sorts of green leaves, amazing. But also, looking at your meats, looking at your fats, and making sure there is a good diversity there. Then we want to think about resistant starches, which exist in oats. So if you want to follow that gluten-free advice, you can, of course, get gluten-free oats, underripe bananas, cooked and cooled potatoes and rice, legumes, also broccoli stems. So when you cook your broccoli, do not get rid of the stems because the stems have the most of the resistant starch, which I have learned recently. Very interesting little fact. Other things, polyphenols. So that is really interesting. One of the main strains that's missing in people with thyroid conditions is called Akkermansia. And one of the ways we can increase the amount of that particular bacteria is by consuming polyphenols. And this is everything that, again, is a bit bitter, darker in color. So things like berries, dark leaves, lots of herbs. In general, herbs are super, super supportive to your microbiome. So whenever I'm cooking, especially when I'm cooking meat, because herbs also deactivate some of the toxins, especially that, create when we cook meat at higher temperatures. Lots of herbs, olive oil, cacao, so, dark chocolate now and again, very supportive to the microbiome, also green tea. And then we have fermented foods daily if you tolerate them well. So things like kefir, yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, kombucha. Again, this is a little bit dependent on your individual gut status. So if you're someone, for example, with that SIBO, so small intestine bacterial overgrowth, these might not sit very well with you, If you're someone with a lot of, for example, a lot of motility issues, so you're really constipated and bloated, then a lot of fiber and resistant starches is not necessarily going to sit well with you, and you might want to introduce it very gradually. So anything here, especially for fiber and fermented foods, beans as well, legumes and beans, we want to include them. But if you're having a reaction, try playing with like a smaller amount, right? So we're going gradually, we're introducing a little bit, and then we're gradually increasing the amount. So don't have the whole bowl of, for example, butter beans that I love and be surprised that there is a bit of a response. Perhaps start with a little bit of a side and then move to including it gradually in higher amounts. Okay, targeted probiotics. So this is something that has come through in very recent research about certain strains being perhaps a little bit more supportive towards thyroid optimization, Hashimoto's reduction. Again, there are more studies in general on Hashimoto's than Graves', unfortunately, because Hashimoto's is so much more prevalent. But a lot of the same mechanisms apply because they both are of autoimmune origin. So we've got lactobacillus, which you might be familiar with, very popular strain, acidophilus. We know that it reduces the antibodies production. Bifidobacterium longum, very, very helpful probiotic strain for that integrity of the gut wall, so leaky gut, but also reducing of the reduction of the inflammation, improves nutrient absorption, lots of benefits here. And also we've got Lactobacillus plantarum. You don't need to remember all of this. You're going to get this presentation, so you can just, you can just check if your probiotics have these strains. Very good outcomes in Hashimoto's as well. So with these, you can either go for individual strains, or when you're buying your probiotics, you can just make sure that they have these strains present. And a little bit of additional note on fiber. So what research has shown as well is that using probiotics together with prebiotics can be really helpful. Prebiotics feed your microbiome. So they give food for the bacteria that we take in a supplement. Sometimes they exist in one supplement, and that's when we call them symbiotics. But what I personally prefer doing in my practice is that we go with a probiotic supplement, and then we include some soluble fiber as that prebiotic. So it basically the food for the bacteria. So something that I would suggest you also do when it comes to fiber supplements, again, they can be received differently by different people depending on what is happening in your gut. So what I have found with my clients and also myself is that soluble fiber, generally speaking, is well tolerated. Depending on the exact microbiome situation, but something called PAGG, which is partially hydrolyzed guar gum, amazing. PHGG, you can search for that. Very well tolerated and really improves for most people, improves the constipation, improves the motility, helps with bloating, stool formation. Amazing. Generally speaking, well tolerated, and it will feed also some of these guys. Okay, so what can you do to lower the inflammation in the gut? You can consider removing gluten and cow's milk. And I know that there's a lot of advice out there that you potentially have been seeing that wants you to go on very strict protocols. And that is, you know, in my experience and everything that I've seen in my own journey and my client's journey is not necessary. However, some eliminations will have a profound effect on how you're feeling and also on your markets. Like you will see better results, you will see lowered autoimmunity, better conversion. And I've linked all the studies about gluten. It's very interesting. So it's not just made up, it is an actual fact, but not everyone must remove everything for life. So again, once we've sealed the gut and corrected those imbalances, for a lot of us, gluten can come back. For example, myself, I've been on this journey for a very long time. And a few years ago, I made an executive decision that sourdough is coming back. And in small amounts, it really, you know, it works for me. Like I have zero spikes in antibodies, nothing, I feel great. But if I have cake not that I would, but if I had cake 3 days in a row, that probably would cause some emergence of some symptoms, especially from the gut for me. Also, reducing, eliminating alcohol. I'm sure you're aware how much, again, has come to light in terms of the effect of alcohol on our brains, but also it disturbs the microbiome so much, even one drink. So obviously it's a personal decision if you want to eliminate completely, but reducing it significantly will have a profound effect. And other things like, you know, fried foods, ultra-processed foods, the usual offenders. You might want to consider your omega-3 intake. So this is, again, I highly recommend if you're a fish eater, get it from food, get it from fish, your oily fish, things like sardines and mackerels and salmon, really, really beneficial. Do some vagus nerve exercises. So I'm going to tell you in a second how to do that. But seriously, through the vagus nerve, we can really impact those things, you know, like inflammation. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time. It doesn't have to be a huge session with a practitioner. You can literally start doing little things daily. It takes 2 minutes and you will see results very quickly. And in terms of supplements, I've just listed things that I use here. But again, when it comes to supplements, I highly recommend that you work with a practitioner, because we can be, you know, taking all the supplements, hoping that something will stick and perhaps not see the result, right? But when we actually perhaps do some testing if it's necessary, or work with a practitioner to create this protocol that works for you, it can make a real difference. But the supplements that I use and recommend, things like curcumin for inflammation, ginger, amazing for thyroid, also for motility. There is some research that shows us that ginger has some really positive effects on things like TSH, for example, and conversion. So, like, you know, many benefits, but be careful if you have a tendency towards higher stomach acid. So if you get like heartburn, be careful, but if you don't, really good one to try. Quercetin, again, if you have a bit of a histamine issue, so that sort of activation, really good for gut lining healing as well. Inflammation reduction, allergies as well. Aloe vera juice, if you can get a cold pressed one, would be amazing. That's something that's, again, amazing for the gut immunity, but also really good for the thyroid. So there is a really interesting study, and I've had a lot of my clients on aloe vera for a long time. A very interesting study that shows us that after 6 to 9 months, so it's a commitment of 50 mils of aloe vera juice, there is a significant reduction of antibodies and TSH and improvement in conversion. So something to really, you know, like investigate, because it might be something you want to try. Of course, I'm not saying that you should do all of this, right? But just presenting you with the actives that I have found helpful. Supporting the gut lining. Supporting the gut lining will help you lower the inflammation and improve the microbiome. L-glutamine, zinc carnosine, collagen peptides hydrolyzed. These 3 things, in my experience, work the best, especially in combination with some of these. And then, like I was saying earlier, supporting your vagal tone and that gut-brain connection. Vagal tone directly modulates the immune activation. permeability, so leaky gut. And there are so many easy things we can do to support this. So number one, the easiest thing you can do is slow down before eating, right? So rather than eating at your desk, rushing, standing, speaking to someone, being on your phone, slow down, take a minute, just maybe move away from your desk. Take a proper minute or even two before food to do some slow breathing. If you can elongate your exhale, that will be very helpful. That puts us in this parasympathetic mode, which is the rest and digest mode, where the food will be well received and the motility will improve for you, especially if you're struggling with things like bloating. Chew properly. So we're all guilty of this, at least 50 times each bite. If you're eating meat, again, you will see the difference and your gut will help you. Your nutrient absorption will improve. Your motility will improve. Give it a go. Set it as a challenge for yourself for a few days and see how you're feeling. Vagus nerve exercises. So little things like humming, for example, like doing all sorts of voo sounds. All of this stimulates the vagus nerve pathway, also stimulates the thyroid, and over time improves that vagal tone. Any breath work with longer exhale. Also cold water exposure. So I'm not saying that you should be doing ice baths, by the way, but a little bit of cold water exposure goes a long way for your nervous system. And also for cold adaptation, if you're someone who's always cold, it's actually good to purposefully expose ourselves to a little bit of cold. So things like submerging your wrist in ice water or doing face dunks can be super supportive, especially if you're someone who's prone to a bit of anxiety. On the spot brings down again from that fight or flight back into regulation. And just in general, working on your mind, body and mind gut connection. So it could be as simple as closing your eyes and doing a bit of a body scan. So, just dropping attention to the body, scanning your body from your feet upwards. Takes a minute, and you can even direct it to your gut, which is really interesting how you can focus on the gut area. And we've got a lot of research showing that doing that regularly improves our gut symptoms, which is amazing. And finally, like I was saying earlier, you might want to look into things like functional testing, personalized protocols. So what I use in my practice are comprehensive stool tests, which is where and how we assess the microbial diversity, the inflammation, dysbiosis, all the things that I've been talking about today. It is an investment, unfortunately, and it really bugs me, how much it does cost these days, but you do it once and you get this insight that it is truly invaluable. A lot of the times it's also good for the peace of mind to know that there isn't like an infection that's hiding, that it could be possibly a trigger for especially if you have an autoimmune thyroid condition. Like it is for me, when I did it for the first time, I was like, okay, there's a bit of dysbiosis, a bit of permeability, but I'm okay. I don't need to eradicate like a parasite or like a bacteria. SIBO testing. So as I said earlier, SIBO is very much prevalent in Hashimoto's especially, but in thyroid conditions in general. And it really needs proper interpretation when you do it. So it's done as a breath test, and it comes back very, very often positive. That positive result doesn't mean for absolutely everyone that it is positive, really, because again, we've got issues with motility, with thyroid conditions, so it needs to be properly interpreted. But something we can do, although SIBO can be diagnosed really easily on just based on symptoms as well. Zonulin, just for your information here, it's not something that you can do by your GP, but it's the marker that we can test when we do like a stool test, and it's a really useful permeability marker. So it can immediately tell us if there is a bit of a leaky gut happening. It's not the only marker, so you can have normal zonulin and still have permeability, but it is something that we test fairly often. And then from your GP, what you can ask for is H. pylori and calprotectin. So calprotectin will tell you about inflammation in the gut. And H. pylori is this very common infection bacteria that I see all the time in Hashi and Graves and all sorts of thyroid conditions, actually. So if you speak to your GP and you explain that you have some digestive symptoms, this is something that they usually, again, not every GP, but perhaps if they don't want to do it, ask for a different one. Generally speaking, I'm very happy to do that. Okay, and this has brought me to the Q&A. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to stop sharing. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for being here and giving yourself this time, showing up for yourself. Shall I take a look at, Lynn, do you have any questions for me? Or
actually, well, some of these things I find really, really interesting because I know a little bit about this. Some of the things you've brought up, I thought, oh, crikey, I need to look into that a little bit. So yeah. I was really interested in how we can help the vagus nerve.
Yes.
And I think, this might sort of connect in some way to mindfulness. I think I might be wrong there,
it will. Yeah, absolutely. So there are different ways we can support this, and it's something I do. Like, I think it was like 4 years ago now when I started using nervous system work and vagus nerve work in my practice, and I can tell you, it's so weird how something so seemingly unrelated can make such a profound change. And mindfulness and meditation in general also has been studied for that. So we see improvement in the vagal tone. So very fascinating.
I need to start doing a little bit more of that. Like you say, we're all rushing, aren't we? I get home from work and then quickly prepare dinner and everything. So
pockets of time. I always say, like finding little pockets of time where we can create like this 5 minutes that we commit to for ourselves, and that is enough. Like the beauty of this nervous system work is that we don't have to do an hour-long session. Like seriously, we don't.
Just little bits.
Little
bits. Sounds good. I do have one question though before I sort other people's queries. You mentioned about herbs.
Yes.
What do you think about using the dried herbs rather than the fresh herbs?
Oh
yeah, that's as good.
Yeah, we use what we can, right? So ideally we would be all growing lovely herbs in the garden and, using all of that. But to be perfectly honest, the studies that have been done, they're done on like commercial herbs. So they're not done on the herbs that have been used, grown privately or some fresh herbs. So no,
that's interesting.
Yeah, just there are so many, things like obviously ginger, curcumin, but like even like doing like Italian herbs mix, oregano, all of this is very, very supportive. And we don't use enough of it, because sometimes we're just worried that we don't know the recipe or something. My solution is just, add everything.
I do. I've got mixed herbs and separate herbs, but I often buy a basil plant. Yeah. But then it just grows and grows because I can't use enough of it for the meals, and then I don't know what to do with it, and then it dies on me. So
I know. Also, I've done this. Rosemary. I always buy this rosemary bush, and I'm like, what am I going to do with all this rosemary? But
okay, there was a question. I think not for that one. Hold on. Let's just go back. I'm not sure if you can answer this question. Even I'm not sure if I can answer it. Okay. How can we educate GPs around the conversion, cortisol, stress situation? More often than not, we're faced with, what do you expect me to do about that? That was a genuine response. And also, that's not how it works, in response to a report of minimal improvement to T4 with a refusal to refer to specialist because the T3 is in range.
So look, like I just feel like in terms of education for GPs, and obviously Lynn, I'm sure you've got your own stance on this, but there's things are changing a little bit. I've had a client who sent me recently a little video from NHS on like actually nervous system activation and how fight or flight works and how somatics even like they're using the vocabulary. So I was very impressed. So that came from like literally British NHS, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So I think things are slowly changing, but I think the good news is that 90% of what I talked about today won't happen with the help of GP, and it won't happen in the GP's office. So a lot of this we do ourselves. So we almost like, instead of looking at the GP to save us, we like, okay, we've educated ourselves. It's unfortunate that we will end up knowing more than the doctors, but we can do so much, so kind of like going, okay, well, I can do things myself.
That's good.
That's how I see it, because otherwise we would be all, every day crying
I know,
about this.
unfortunately, it's like we're going to be working with Odyssey now. And at the moment, private therapists, nutritionists like you aren't on the list, but it's something that we're pushing for.
Yeah.
Because I do think it's needed, because the GPs, they're either not trained or they don't know, not interested in sort of doing this kind of thing. I know they've got a lot on their plates anyway, with just all kinds of diseases and issues. So
Yeah, they just don't see, especially hypothyroidism is just not seen as important, right?
yeah,
So even by endos, to be honest, I've had so
yeah,
many clients seeing specialists, consultants, even
yeah,
privately, and it's just minimized because you're not gonna die. It's not like a life-threatening
yeah, that's
condition,
right.
so who cares,
Yeah, I just answered a question to someone this morning saying, to be honest, it might be better if you see a private GP, because they actually, and there's a lot of GPs on our list that do work in nutrition as well, rather than seeing an endo. Some endos are really lovely, but and they
Yes,
understand
some.
about
Yes,
T3, but not everyone. So Linda has asked, will homemade sauerkraut be beneficial for the gut?
It will, but in a slightly different way than what we think. So we think that it's going to be because of the bacteria, and it's got like millions or billions of strains, but most of them actually die once they go through our digestive tract. So the stomach acid basically kills quite a lot of it, not all of it, but what it does, it serves as this prebiotic. So it serves as the food for the bacteria. So it's super effective. So 100%, like I have sauerkraut every day. I've got a bit of a problem, I think, but yes, no, if you can, and if you tolerate it well, you will get some of the bacteria, but you'll get a lot of food for the microbiome, which is amazing.
So what's the difference then between the homemade and the ones we can buy in the shop?
Or
Was it
homemade.
the same?
Oh, was it home at the homemade? To be perfectly honest, you depending on what do you buy, because we have some really nice like live raw sauerkraut available in the shops these days. So I'm not going to mention brands because I don't think we should mention brands, but there are brands available that do raw live sauerkraut that hasn't been was pasteurized, so it hasn't been heat treated, so the bacteria are still present. Also, sometimes you go to shops that have some Eastern European and Central European foods, like for example in Poland, where I'm from, sauerkraut is like a national food, right? So if you find like a Polish sauerkraut, it's generally speaking going to be raw and fresh, and and it's very affordable, very cheap. So that is a great option. If you can make it yourself, then you are controlling the environment. Like, you're not going to use any preservatives, you're not going to heat treat it. But you have to also obviously follow the process. Having said that, it's so easy that I highly recommend. I make when I can be bothered not to buy it, but it happens. It used to happen in the pandemic a lot. I used to make it a lot, and you can't go wrong. I thought I messed up so many times, and it just always works out perfectly tasty. So yeah, try it. I think it's
okay. So perhaps when you do an article for us, you could put the sauerkraut recipe in.
Oh yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think we should totally do that.
I've never tried it myself, so I don't know if anyone else has.
It's weirdly like, because I always thought, oh, what if it's not like submerged, it's going to go off or something. It just doesn't, because you add salt, and salt acts as a preservative, and it's just yeah, it's very easy.
Well, perhaps I ought to try it.
Yeah, you should.
Okay, so Roz is saying, clinical findings, please can you post or share the medical research papers backing this?
Yep, it's in the slides.
She says RCTs are important here, so we can have a chance of persuading GPs to pay attention.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I recommend that. So what I have been suggesting to my clients is to literally print out research papers, take it to the GP, do a bit of an education. Usually they feel a bit, embarrassed because why I should know this, perhaps. All of these are very good research, basically. So it's not like some sort of, obviously some studies are smaller, some studies are larger. As we know, this unfortunately thyroid is is largely underfunded. Like, you know, it exists in women only, which is one of the reasons why there is not that much research, especially when it comes to natural interventions, because, you know, this is a huge business, thyroid conditions worldwide. So they want us to take medication. So yeah, so the research is not as abundant as it perhaps could be, but still we've got a lot out there. So I would just print it out and take it with you.
So she also said mainland UK GPs won't be doing SIBO. I say SIBO, is that wrong? It's SIBO?
I say SIBO. I think in the States they say SIBO, but SIBO is yeah, like, you know, either.
Or looking at anything else when labs, i.e. T4 and TSH alone, are alleged to be in range, even when skating along the bottom. Yeah, it's hard. I doubt, I mean, this is just my view, I doubt GPs even know what SIBO is.
Some of them do, because I've had but only for like more GI clients. So they wouldn't be doing investigations towards this for just a thyroid person who doesn't really complain about the GI symptoms. But if you're like a GI patient for them, I've had people being referred to a specialist. And then there was a conversation, so the GP was aware, but it's not common. No. When it comes to what I would say is that as far as the functional testing goes, actually the testing is not crazy expensive. So it's around like £100 to do the breath test. But then obviously you need to have, generally speaking, a practitioner, but you could just do it yourself, you know, and just get the result and see. For the T3 and antibodies, seriously, finger prick testing is the way. It's very accurate. It's easy to do at home. Things, you know, different companies, Medichecks, Randox, Blue Horizon, there are so many that do it these days, and just don't wait for them to do it. It costs Randox Health, I think it's still £36. So, you know, I mean,
if you're going to go down that route, it's always a good idea to list the symptoms you still have that may be hypo symptoms, and take it to the GP for a discussion about it. But I mean, Tara and Mary are going to be discussing their campaign with the ICBs, because that's an issue. This is what this lady said, because GPs won't even check T3 unless authorised by a consultant endo, who's more likely to be a diabetes specialist. Yes. Yes, I am frustrated. I'm an NHS trained senior nursing officer, and I'm being left to deal by myself, fighting against GPs and an ICB that doesn't even have a policy for care for thyroid issues. And this was something admitted by the ICB in writing. I think Tara and Mary will be bringing up some information about that. Are there any more on here? So do these protocols help with non-autoimmune hypothyroidism? So I'm guessing if you've had a thyroidectomy, something like that.
Yeah, so actually, interestingly, because thyroidectomy, even if you had thyroidectomy, like if it was like a cancer or something like that, of course, then we've got a different origin. But if it was due to Graves, then the autoimmunity is still kind of present. The conditions that cause the autoimmunity are still present. And I'm not saying that absolutely everyone has an autoimmune condition, but interestingly, even Hashimoto's, 10% of Hashimoto's shows up without antibodies. So you can have no antibodies and have Hashimoto's. Right. So you'd have to do like a thyroid scan and see what the thyroid structure looks like to really know. But assuming there is definitely 100% confirmed, then yes, the answer is yes, because again, the thyroid as a gland is affected by everything else in the body. So what you've been seeing a lot, obviously, I do talk about Hashimoto's quite a lot, but a lot of those studies just talk about changes in TSH, T3, and T4. So it is that axis, the thyroid gut axis, is something that's deeply studied these days. Like it's a very much of interest of the researchers. That is not just for Hashimoto's, because Hashimoto's and hypo are very different conditions. So if they, for example, researching the link between thyroid and the microbiome, that's it. They're focusing on the thyroid, not on the autoimmunity. So 100% yes. Like I've got, you know, most of the people I work with, because it's 90%, obviously, they have autoimmunity, but I also work with people without, and they respond to very similar strategies.
Yeah, I mean, I was I had my thyroidectomy because finally we found out it was a non-cancerous lump in mine. I was ill for 15 years. And then because I had the thyroidectomy, they put me onto levothyroxine and I started to get better, so much better. So I had something, but I was never tested for antibodies. So
interesting.
Yeah,
And have you tested now, just out of
I have
curiosity?
tested, yeah, I test regularly, but they're very small amount.
I think it's too late now because after the
Yeah.
thyroid has been removed, I think it's only, was it 2 or 3 years when you can still see the antibodies and then they just die because there is no thyroid. So, interesting.
Okay, so would I need to go gluten and milk-free before seeing a functional medicine practitioner and seeing an endocrinologist?
Well, you can do little things to help yourself, right?
Yeah.
And see how your body responds. So, ideally, obviously, in an ideal world where everything would be accessible, everyone would go and work with someone, but it's not necessarily available to everyone, right? Or available immediately. So what you might do is a bit of an experiment and just cut these things out, because to be perfectly honest, in the current day and age, cutting out gluten and cow's milk is fairly easy. We've got good substitutes. There's so much else we can eat and delicious things, right? So I would, if I was, diagnosed or in your shoes now, I would just do those, things that I've listed as things that you can do yourself. Just try it and see what happens. You might feel better immediately.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I hear this all the time, but would you say cutting out gluten and milk at the same time or one at a time?
I would say so, because they are like cow's milk, as in milk, non-fermented, unless it's there is something called A2 milk, which is milk from, oh my God, it's at Sainsbury's. There is basically not shepherds. There is this cow, basically, it's like special milk from cows that produce milk that is not so pro-inflammatory. So let me just, hold on, I'm gonna, sorry, I need to tell you because it's very interesting. milk. Okay, I'm going to share it with you, Lynn, so maybe you can share with everyone. But there is a type of milk that is slightly less pro-inflammatory, but basically every single commercially available cow's milk will be hormonally active. It will have casein proteins that are very pro-inflammatory, and it will create more inflammation in the gut. Some of these proteins, they get basically damaged through fermentation. So when we have kefir or yogurt, it's not as detrimental to the gut. So if you can do just cow's milk, but leave the cheeses and all of this and gluten, I would do it at the same time, because these are the two offenders that I see make the biggest difference to people, to the actual symptoms.
Yeah. She's also said, and for how long should we eliminate gluten and milk for gut healing? I have been gluten-free for a few months, but still use milk. So I think you've answered part of that question.
So in terms of the length of time, so how I look at it, whenever I ask my clients to remove things, it's because we are also doing other things. So we are removing the main drivers of inflammation. And at the same time, we are focusing on the gut. We are focusing on the nervous system and how we remove toxins. These three things. And then after we've worked on those things, only then I would put it back, because there is no point just removing it for a few months and then putting it back, because if you're not going to do anything else, it's very unlikely like the leaky gut would just heal and all the inflammation will go away just because of that one change. So that's something that I a lot of the times have conversations with clients about, because they're like, no, it doesn't work for me. It's like, gluten is fine. It's okay. It's incorrect. And I'm like, but what happened? Like, you took it out and then what did you do? Because you can't just wait for a miracle. Having said that, a lot of people do see a lot of change, like immediately. So it's very individual, but I would say for gluten, just time wise, minimum 6 months. And I think cow's milk has no place in our diet, like full stop.
So how soon would people, because I've heard people say, well, I cut it out for a month and it didn't make any difference to me, to my symptoms.
Yeah.
So how long normally would it be before you noticed a better thing going on with your symptoms?
So it depends what symptoms you're looking for, because if you're looking just for digestive symptoms, a lot of people will have improvements fairly quickly with digestion. But for a lot of people, that will be more improvements with like brain fog, energy levels, that sense of disinflammation I was talking about, and that can be a longer game. So that can be a few months. But again, I've got like a whole post about it. Maybe I can write about it. So that it's not like, don't just remove gluten and just sit there and think, okay, I'm now waiting to feel amazing, because you only removed an irritant. You removed the source of inflammation, but everything else I was talking about today, like, is still like, it's still happening. So we won't be able to heal the gut just by removing it, but including some of the supplements, working with the vagus nerve, some of that, you know, gut, like improving how you remove toxins as well, because that's another factor. And, you know, and then you might want to try to put it back. But a lot of my clients like feel so good without it that they don't.
They don't bother putting it back. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So Karen has said, is there a difference between cow's milk and goat's milk? So they can drink, I think that's what she means. She can drink goat's milk or oat milk or...
Yeah. So basically, Jersey milk. Okay, this is it. Jersey milk is the milk that's, again, slightly less inflammatory. So that you can get in the UK, not super available, but like you can find it. So that's alongside of the goat's milk, sheep's milk, all of that can be slightly less pro-inflammatory, yes. But to be perfectly honest, again, I just to have a clear picture, I would just for a bit just get rid of it. There are so many good alternatives. There is a milk called Sprout. It's a brand that it's just the best milk when it comes to like not curding and doing weird things in the coffee. So that's it's like a blue stripy bottle, very tasty. Like, just switch to that for a bit and just have this conversation kind of parked for a bit, and then maybe you can try to put
How
back.
do you spell that? If I put this
Sproud.
Sprout, just like Brussels sprouts.
It's a D at the end.
D.
Yeah, and it's the blue one. So the blue one hasn't got sugar.
Okay.
And it's really, I've converted everyone to it. It's just so nice. To me, it tastes better than milk because it doesn't have that milky, you know how milk can be sometimes like almost too much. So like really good, and you know, like almond milk as well. Oat milk, again, not really, because it's got gluten usually. And it's also a carbohydrate, liquid carbohydrate, which is something we don't want. But Sprout is also, it's got protein in it instead of carbohydrate, which is always nice. So just, you know what I'm saying, just instead of like trying to hack it and find milk that maybe is a little bit less pro-inflammatory, let's just not for a bit, and then maybe try to, if you want, put it back.
It's quite a long one here from Roz. Not sure. Oh, it's very long. Oh, crikey, it is long. I think I'll send it to you and then we'll see. I don't know if it's actually a question though. So I have looked at cow's milk alternatives in the supermarket, but all of them seem to be fortified and always include added calcium, which will affect levo uptake. I've ruled trying them out due to this. Can you suggest any that might be all right?
Yes, but you wouldn't be having, I don't know what you put your milk in, but you ideally wouldn't be having your levothyroxine with your coffee anyway, or tea. So that you wouldn't be taking it close to each other anyway. So I'm going to share a tip on how to take levothyroxine. So there is another very interesting study that says that if you take your levothyroxine, the first minute, literally when you wake up, with a tiny sip of water, so rather than taking the glass or half a glass that we've been told, take it with a tiny sip of water and wait half an hour before having water even. That improves the absorption by 20%. So it's like all my clients are on this now. So
really? Wow.
It's
that
really
is interesting.
That is interesting. Following this, so you wait half an hour, then you have water, then you can wait another half an hour before you have anything with polyphenols which mess up with the absorption. So anything like tea, coffee, food, it needs to be an hour. So even if you have something with a little bit of calcium added at that time, it's not really going to make a huge difference. But I don't know if Sprout has that If it does, it's honestly like everyone who I know is on it, and we haven't had any issues. So
Yeah.
I just
Okay, that's interesting. What's this one? I don't think I've missed any out. No. I've been using Sprout milk, which is a pea protein milk, suggested by Aggie, as I'm on her current thyroid course.
Yeah, hi, Karen.
I found it fine in tea and porridge. Wow, interesting. On a positive note, I replaced bread with quinoa, and that really helped more quickly. That's from Karen. Ros again, a thyroid patient who doesn't really complain. I've been complaining for 10 plus years. There are so many failings in the GP system, and yet they are gatekeeper. So every other specialist level care. Oh. Okay, Sprout from Sainsbury's has calcium carbonate in it.
But just like I explained, because you're not going to be taking it with your medication, that doesn't matter, because you're going to be having calcium in all the foods. Like if you have sardines with bones, you're going to get calcium. You have broccoli, you get calcium. So it's, so I think we have to be realistic about things we can control. And I think it's very easy to get hung up on those little things, whereas actually we should be taking steps to do the things that I've mentioned. And and like the minor details will not make the biggest change in this grand picture here,
No, that's it now. I think we need to go for a little break.
Okay,
we'll be
I'm
back.
Gonna hop off if that's okay, Lynn. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you so much. I mean, I've learned stuff. I'm sure other people have as well. The next speaker is Caroline Webb, the thyroid nutritionist, who will be speaking about iodine. Caroline has spoken at events for us before, and she also writes articles for our member magazine, Harmony. So, are you there, Caroline? Are you ready?
I am. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hello, I can see you too. Lovely to see you again, Caroline. It wasn't that long ago.
You too, my dear.
The title of your talk is Iodine, Friend or Foe, which I'm really looking forward to, because so many people come to me and say, can you find me a supplement that doesn't have iodine in it? Or I want to take some iodine. Is it a good idea? So I think this is going to be really good for people to know what's good and what's not good about iodine. So thank you very much. Looking forward to it.
You're welcome. Okay, cool, brilliant. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for Lynn for letting me have a wee chat with you today. I am going to be talking about iodine, as Lynn said, whether it's a friend or a foe to the thyroid. And honestly, the answer is a bit of both. Iodine is absolutely essential for thyroid health, but it's also one of the few nutrients where both too little and too much can create problems, especially if you've already got a thyroid condition. So today I really want to cut through some of the confusion and fear around iodine and give you a more balanced understanding of where it fits into thyroid. Let's get the boring bit over and done with first with a quick disclaimer. So the information I'm sharing today is purely for educational purposes only and must not be used as a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. And always speak to your doctor before making changes to your medication or to supplements to ensure that it's appropriate for you. So what we're covering today, I'm going to dive into why iodine matters for thyroid health, why too little and too much can cause issues, the connection with Hashimoto's and Graves', food sources and hidden exposures, pregnancy considerations, testing options, and also, most importantly, the practical takeaways. So my goal is really to help you feel less confused about iodine, not more. And there'll also be some time at the end, hopefully, for some questions. So please put any in the chat. So a little bit about me. For those who don't know me, I'm Caroline Webb. I'm the thyroid nutritionist, and I've spent the last 8 or so plus years now supporting people with thyroid conditions, helping them to find and address the root causes behind them so that they can feel more balanced, energized, and like themselves again. I also have Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. And I've also graduated into menopause. So I've gone through the perimenopause and now postmenopausal, and I've kept both my conditions in remission, and they still are. Now, I regularly support Thyroid UK with their Harmony magazine and with webinars at their get-together events. And I'm also a multi-award-winning thyroid practitioner now and a board-certified strategic thyroid specialist. I'm also a health coach, a nutrigenomics specialist, and a registered naturopath and registered nutritional therapist. So, Let's dive into iodine. Now, it is an essential trace mineral, which means we only need a very small exact amount. As T4 contains 4 iodine atoms and T3 contains 3, without iodine, we literally cannot make those hormones. Most of the body's iodine is stored in the thyroid gland, but it's also important for other tissues too, including the breast, ovarian tissue, and brain development. It's also used as an antiseptic, expectorant, and also used in image contrast agents. So, the Goldilocks principle. With many nutrients, we need the right safe amount, which is known as a Goldilocks principle or a therapeutic window. The same goes for iodine, but it has the narrowest safe range of any window of any nutrient. So it really is what we call a Goldilocks nutrient. So having too much or too little can be extremely problematic, and especially for those who are genetically more vulnerable to thyroid autoimmunity. Now, the relationship between the intake and thyroid disorders is what we call a U-shape. So here's a graph that depicts it. So what you can see here is that both I don't know if my thing's working here, but you can in the low section, so right down here where it says disease risk, you can see as it gets really low and we are deficient, we can have problems such as congenital hypothyroidism if the mother is obviously struggling, but also as adults we can get goiter and hypothyroidism as well. And equally at the other side of this U-shaped curve, we can also struggle when we have too much with hypothyroidism, autoimmune conditions, goiter and thyroid cancers and things. So it can be a problem. So reduced hormone production can be a problem, whilst high amounts of excess iodine can also be a problem as well. So what is a U-shaped graph? What the U-shaped graph confirms is that additional iodine intake above an adequate level, which is actually shown in this blue hashed area here, that obviously does not enhance hormone production. So we won't produce more thyroid hormone, and it may actually increase the dysfunction and the risk of autoimmune thyroid in those that are susceptible. So they might have genetic issues, for example. Now, laid on top of this narrow window is our ability to tolerate higher levels of iodine on occasions and or consistently. And this tolerance largely depends on our genetics from our ancestors and whether they were adapted for coastal or inland living. So coastal genetics help us to detoxify and clear excess iodine better so we can tolerate higher levels. Think of the Japanese who eat lots of seaweed products. But those with inland genetics are better at storing and concentrating it, as access to iodine foods in the past was less frequent because it came from the sea. So those that are less tolerant, so they're less tolerant to higher levels. But there's, as with everything, there is a maximum, there is a ceiling. So adding more beyond a certain level can cause issues, as we've seen in the U-shaped graph before. So the Japanese, whilst they have a greater tolerance for higher levels, they also have the highest incidence of all types of thyroid disease globally. So more is not always better. Now, when we do have too little iodine, when we take in too little iodine on a consistent basis, thyroid hormone production does suffer, and we don't have enough of the raw material iodine needed, so we don't make enough thyroid hormone, and this can cause a host of symptoms, some of which are shown here. It's not an exhaustive list, and many of these overlap with hypothyroidism or sluggish thyroid symptoms, and I'm sure a few of you might be all too familiar with some of them. I know I was with most of these as well. However, most people are not truly iodine deficient. The issues stem more from having an excess of iodine. So, what can happen when we're exposed to too much iodine? There's quite a lot here, so I'm going to go slowly through all of these areas for you. So, a thyroid gland stores pre-made thyroid hormones, so ready to be used when we need it, and also stores iodine for future use to obviously make thyroid hormones. But when there's more iodine absorbed, so when we take in more iodine from our food or supplements, and that we can then we can actually store, the excess can cause damage and inflammation in the thyroid gland whilst it's hanging around waiting to be made into thyroid hormones or put into storage. Now, this is especially important if we haven't got enough of the antioxidants glutathione and selenium to mop up the damage inside the thyroid gland. Now, in the short term, a very high dose can evoke a protective safety switch, which is called the Wolff-Chaikoff effect, which temporarily shuts down thyroid hormones production. So we don't make too much, because obviously too much can be more problematic. So think of it like a home fuse box. An overload trips the switch and the lights and power go out. This results in hypothyroid symptoms, which usually rights itself in a couple of weeks as iodine levels begin to drop, and we can, but in some it can turn into permanent hypothyroidism, especially in those with autoimmune thyroid conditions, and also if they've got a prior thyroid injury, such as a head trauma or impaired adaptive capacity within the body. Now, this effect, this Wolff-Chaikoff effect, can also trigger hyperthyroidism in some, and it can also trigger autoimmune disease, a thyroid autoimmune disease. And the effect is not always an all or nothing situation, as a smaller iodine excess that we might be exposed to can slow the thyroid without fully stopping it. So the Wolff-Chaikoff effect is normally an on or off situation, but also the thyroid has the ability to adapt when it does come into contact with excesses, but not necessarily so high excesses that it will switch everything off. And this lower iodine excess and this exposure without fully stopping the thyroid can account for a fluctuating TSH level. So if you have your test results and 1 minute your TSH is in normal range, and the next time you get it tested using the same lab, it might be a lot higher, and then the next time it's lower, and you're like, well, what is going on? Well, iodine exposure could be behind all of that. Now, damage to the gland from a high iodine intake can also encourage the immune system to come into the thyroid, where it can either target thyroglobulin, which is a building block of thyroid hormones, or it can target the enzyme thyroid peroxidase that oxidizes iodine and bolts it onto thyroglobulin to form the thyroid hormones. Now, over time, we can see raised Hashimoto's antibodies, that TPO, and thyroglobulin antibodies, as well as autoimmune flares and transient hyperthyroid symptoms. And what happens here is that the damaged thyroid cells spill their stored hormones into the bloodstream, which obviously speeds everything up for a while in the body, because the body's got a little bit more T4 or might have some more T3. And then obviously once the body's burnt through all of that and used it all up, then obviously they can revert back to hypothyroid or to normal. And too much iodine can also overwhelm the little enzyme iodinase 2 that converts the T4 into our active T3, which ultimately reduces the amount of T3 that we have. And excess iodine can also drive elevated or unstable TSH levels that we talked about earlier, which also confuses the thyroid and how much hormones it actually needs to produce. And we can also see a goiter, which is a swelling of the thyroid, nodule development, and reduced hormone production and hypothyroidism over time as a result of that. And iodine is absorbed through the gut, and an excess can also disrupt the beneficial gut bacteria that live there due to its disinfectant or its antibacterial properties. This can cause digestive discomfort like wind, bloating, sluggish constipation, food intolerances, and also we can also see a decline in the beneficial bacteria. If you did a stool test, you can obviously see that some of those might be low or missing. So gut health and thyroid autoimmunity are closely linked, most probably already know, and our digestive symptoms can worsen if you've started a kelp or seaweed based product or a new supplement containing iodine sources. So if that is happening, then maybe excess iodine could be a contributing factor. So it's one to consider. Okay, so who is sensitive to an excess of iodine? Well, you've probably read lots of things online, but yes, if you've got autoimmune thyroid disease, so you've got Hashimoto's or you've got Graves', and you're also, and this is really important, if you're also low in antioxidants such as glutathione and selenium, then you can see autoimmune thyroid disease flare or worsen with an excess of iodine. And it also can occur when you've got too little iodine as well. In particular, those with Graves' and those with nodules that are what we call are autonomous, so they're working independently of the instruction on TSH, may see hypothyroid symptoms worsen with an excess of iodine, and as there's more iodine available, they obviously can make more thyroid hormones as well. Now, those with a selenium deficiency or very low levels of selenium intake, either from foods or if they're also working with other things that are depleting the selenium in the body, and those with an existing iodine deficiency, i.e. they really are taking hardly any in. So if you're not eating enough iodine-rich food, so maybe you are vegan or vegetarian, or you're not eating dairy or eggs and things like that that are very high in iodine or have a good amount of iodine rather, then obviously that can be a problem. They're also quite sensitive to higher iodine levels, and that is irrespective of having any autoimmune thyroid disease, but also it would be equally worse for those who do as well. So again, if you are, and those who are iodine deficient, just as a side here, and then obviously an excess, so obviously being in an iodine deficient state and then having a big excess coming into the body can cause the transient hypothyroidism as well. But good news, it's not all doom and gloom. There is an increasing body of research that is showing that sticking to 150 micrograms, which is a recommended daily amount of iodine when you have autoimmune thyroid conditions, is not likely to make your autoimmune thyroid diseases worse, and is associated with the most stable thyroid function and obviously hormone production, which is really good news. Okay, so really the requirements for iodine and having adequate iodine, so remember that U-shaped curve, and being within the recommended daily amount of around 150 micrograms, it doesn't disappear. We still need iodine in order for the thyroid gland to function optimally. So even though we may have autoimmune conditions such as Hashimoto's and Graves', don't be shy of iodine and don't steer away from iodine either. You do still need it. As I said earlier, it's really important to make the hormones, but there's also other tissues in the body that also need it as well. Now, the missing piece to the story here is that selenium mops up any damage in the thyroid, which is caused by the normal production of thyroid hormones. So by producing it, we can create damage, and so it can come in and mop it all up inside the thyroid. And also it can help mop up the damage that's caused by the excess iodine as well. So it's really important that you are eating selenium-rich foods. So inadequate amounts can obviously make things worse. And also, if you've not got enough coming from the diet, that's obviously one of the issues. And also, if you have been exposed to heavy metals, in particular mercury, so whether you've drunk some, been exposed from water, if you've got, I'm trying to think what that's called now, the mercury amalgam fillings, so silver fillings in your mouth, for example, then, you know, what happens in the body is that selenium is used to obviously buffer, so protect us from the negative impact of mercury, and so the body will use up selenium that way around, which means that we can also have less amounts in the body if the body's busy doing that, which also means there's less available to support our thyroid hormone conversion and also to mop up the damage in the thyroid as well. So pregnancy and postpartum needs a little bit of support as well. So our iodine needs increase both during pregnancy and if we're breastfeeding afterwards as well. So during trimester 1, the fetus is solely relying on the maternal thyroid hormones before its own thyroid can start to take over in trimester 2, and where it's then able to absorb iodine out of mum's blood. So higher iodine levels are also critical for the brain development through pregnancy and also postpartum. So having it in the milk as well. Obviously, if you're not breastfeeding, then formula feeding contains iodine. But obviously, if you are breastfeeding, you need to obviously have it take out in iodine to make sure, because obviously the brain continues to develop in infancy. So the RDA, recommended daily amount for pregnancy and breastfeeding, is a lot higher at 250 micrograms. Now, the immune system is naturally suppressed during pregnancy to accept the growing baby, and thyroid antibodies also are generally reduced as a result of that. But in the postpartum period after baby, antibodies can rise as the immune system rebounds, and we can see a resurgence of any pre-existing thyroid autoimmunity, as well as an increased risk of developing postpartum thyroiditis, which can over time result in permanent hypothyroidism. So that postpartum period is not the time to be self-dosing higher iodine levels. Always work with a practitioner. During that period. Now, if you have autoimmune thyroid disease, so Hashimoto's and Graves', but especially Hashimoto's, it's important to lower your thyroid antibodies and get your TSH below 2.5 before becoming pregnant, and to maintain TSH in the pregnancy reference range throughout the whole of the trimesters as well. So again, if you are wanting to conceive, or you're trying to conceive, and your TSH is, you know, above 2.5, etc., then it may be worth having a chat with your GP about whether or not you need to look at thyroid hormone replacement to help bring down that TSH, because again, TSH stimulates the thyroid to obviously produce more, and obviously when we are pregnant, we are going to need more iodine, so obviously we might need to have some support there. So always work with a practitioner or speak to your GP for things like that. Okay, so just a little recap on what we've covered so far. So just make sure that you're still with me, because we've covered quite a lot, and quite a lot of confusing messaging as well in the past. So hopefully that's now sitting a little bit clearer for you. So we've seen that the thyroid prefers consistent, or that just right, that Goldilocks amount of iodine, rather than swings of too much or too little. Otherwise, it gets too busy reacting to the fluctuating iodine levels, rather than focusing on producing a stable and consistent amount of thyroid hormones for us. And also, as we've seen, that when we've got too little for too long, which in this diagram here is shown as a deficiency of less than 100 micrograms. UG means micrograms. It can also be shown as MCG as well. Then we can see a multitude of symptoms and problems, which we've talked about. And then also an excess of over 300 micrograms can also cause a host of issues too, which we've also looked at. So we need to have a look at the adequate intake level. And what the actual RDAs are. So to find out how much iodine is just right for normal thyroid production and stable hormone production. So for the thyroid function and hormone production, sorry, get my words in it is. The World Health Organization recommends 150 micrograms, as you can see, for an adult, which is a child over 12 as well as classed as an adult. And then if you're pregnant or you're breastfeeding, i.e. lactation, then you do need more, about 250 micrograms. Now the WHO defines an iodine deficiency as less than 100 micrograms for adults and less than 150 micrograms during pregnancy as well. So where do we get our iodine from? Well, there are top food sources, and these are the ones listed here. And there's a fantastic comprehensive list detailing the average iodine amounts for certain foods on Thyroid UK's website, or you can also find it on the British Dietetic Association's website too. But a few things to note here. Fish and seafood, they have got a large variable amount of iodine, and they can range from 10 micrograms up to 190 micrograms per 100 gram of food. Seaweeds and sea veg, the iodine content in them varies wildly and may exceed tolerable upper limits, so be warned and be careful. So just give you an idea, try to avoid kelp and kombu, which are brown seaweeds, so avoid brown seaweeds, and they have a variable high amount that can range from several hundred micrograms, so it could put you already over that excess of 300, to several thousand micrograms per gram of dry weight. So obviously that's quite a lot. So I always recommend clients to use nori, which is red seaweed, and that was found in like sushi rolls, as the iodine content is generally a lot lower, and probably 1 to 2 sheets a couple of times a week. Dairy, now the iodine in dairy primarily comes from it, the teat sanitizers that are used during the milking process. So it's not inherently in the milk, and also it's added to the cow's feed as well to keep them healthy, but also obviously as an added, it obviously will make it through into the milk as well. Salt, so sea salt, pink Himalayan salt, regular table salt, and most electrolyte supplements have got very low amounts of iodine or none at all. So salt sold in the UK is not required to be fortified with iodine, but it is in other countries, so just be aware if you're going on your holidays this summer. It is fortified, no, sorry, if a salt is fortified, it will say iodized on the label. And there are a few brands in the UK, which include Saxa, Cerebos, Tata and Lab. So, but just watch with iodized salt, because just half a teaspoon can give you the recommended 150 micrograms RDA. So be very careful with the amount. And the good news on Brazil nuts is you probably know that they're really good for selenium as well as iodine. So that's great. 2 bangs for one nut, as it said. Okay, so that's the good stuff, but we can be exposed to hidden sources, which are also found in some ingredients in foods, supplements, and also thyroid supplements as well. So thyroid support supplements that contain kelp, Irish moss, or bladderwrack seeds. So iodine is also in personal care products, cosmetics, and in some medications and contrast image dyes as well. Now, there's a great list on Dr. Alan Christiansen's website, and that's got a list of foods and ingredients that are found in supplements and cosmetics. It is American, so obviously some of the, we might not have all of those things available and in products over the UK, but it's a really good place, just to have a good look at what could potentially be in some of the things that you're using, and check the ingredients label all the time. And there's also an extensive list of medications containing iodine on Thyroid UK's website. Now, if you are concerned about any of your medications containing iodine, then speak to your pharmacist to see if there's a safer alternative for you. And as I said here, always check the labels before you're supplementing with anything. Now, to clear up a question I get asked all the time, do thyroid medications contain iodine? Well, replacement thyroid hormone medications such as levothyroxine, which are T4 only, as well as things like T3 and T4 combo medications do contain iodine, but this is bound up into the actual thyroid hormones itself. So if you remember that T4 has got 4 iodine atoms and T3 has got 3 iodine atoms in their structure. So the iodine in them is not in a free form that can contribute immediately to any excess. Now, because the body has first got to break down the iodine from the hormones before it can be used to make thyroid hormones and support other cellular functions and tissues who use iodine. So by taking your medication, it's not going to immediately increase your iodine intake. So it's estimated that in 100 micrograms of levothyroxine, it will provide roughly 40 to 50 micrograms of bound up iodine. So to work out how much iodine you're likely getting from your personal T4 dose, you can multiply your dose by around 40 to 50%. So for example, if you're taking 75 micrograms of levothyroxine, which is a typical dose, you're likely getting around 30 to 37.5 micrograms of bound up iodine with each dose. Now, the amount in T3 only medications will be slightly less than this, as T3 contains 25% fewer iodine atoms than T4. Now, if you are on NDT, so prescribed natural desiccated thyroid, not a thyroid glandular, but a prescribed thyroid medication from either the GP or endocrinologist or private GP, it does contain both the free and the bound iodine forms. So the free iodine is coming from any that was stored in the animal's gland when it obviously was slaughtered, and the bound iodine is also coming from any stored thyroid hormones that were in that gland. So the amount in 1 grain is estimated to be around 130 micrograms, which is comprised of both the free and the bound iodine. So even though thyroid medications do contain some bound iodine, based on the average dose that most people in the UK are taking, it isn't enough to cause issues for most thyroid patients, which is good news. And most of us do not need additional high-dose iodine above the recommended daily amounts either. Okay, so now let's look at what can reduce the amount of iodine available to us. So let's first define what a goitrogen is. It is any substance that interferes with the uptake of iodine into the thyroid. That then results in a swelling, known as the goiter, and results in lower thyroid hormone levels. And it's especially effective in those who are already deficient in iodine. Now, goitrogens can come from foods as well as chemicals. Now, you might have read or heard about raw goitrogen foods such as cruciferous vegetables. They can block iodine absorption. Now, they have a very weak effect, and when we consume them in normal food amounts, there's a very, very weak effect. So it's not going to really affect your thyroid's function at all. So we don't need to avoid them. So that is really good news. Keep eating your cruciferous vegetables. Those are things like broccoli, kale, cauliflower, cabbage, because they're beneficial antioxidants. So if you think of the damage we talked about earlier in the thyroid, that's oxidative damage, oxidative stress. That's like a little fire because it causes inflammation. So inflammation in the body is little fires, and antioxidants are little fire extinguishers that come and put out those fires. And glutathione does that in the thyroid. It also does it elsewhere in the body, but it's really important for the thyroid. And then cruciferous vegetables also have compounds which also support our liver's function. So another reason not to avoid them. However, if you are eating platefuls of raw cruciferous veg on a daily basis and you're iodine deficient, then I would recommend you steam or saute your cruciferous vegetables first, because that can help lower the load of goitrogens. So heating them actually deactivates the goitrogenic compounds that's inside them. But to be honest with you, I'm not sure there's many people who eat a plateful of raw broccoli on the daily anyway. Okay, now chemical goitrogens do compete with iodine for absorption into the thyroid and will affect the thyroid's function, so try to reduce exposure to them where possible. The ones that we come in contact with most frequently are halogens, and they're listed here: bromine, fluorine, and chlorine. So halogens share a similar chemical structure to iodine, and they can compete for absorption into the thyroid. Now, our thyroid can't use them to make thyroid hormones, so with less iodine available, the thyroid is ultimately going to make less hormones, and over time that can lead to hypothyroidism. Now, fluoride or fluorine is added to drinking water in some parts of the UK, not all, and primarily to promote dental health. But recent research shows it doesn't reduce the risk of cavities in adults at any significant level. So a recent 2024 study in the US reported rates of hypothyroidism in areas that did add fluoride to the water were twice as high compared to areas that didn't add it in. So fluoride it's one to watch and try to minimize as much as possible. You'll find it in toothpaste and mouthwashes, some red and black teas, processed beverages, and some medications as well. Chlorine, like fluoride, can be added to drinking water as a disinfectant, but it's predominantly used in swimming pools, obviously, and that you're all aware of that horrible chlorine smell. But it's also a key component of some bleaches as well. Bromine, now that's the use of it in foods is banned in the UK, Europe, and Canada, but not in America, where it can be found as potassium bromate, and that gets added to baked goods, flours, and some citrus flavored soft drinks as well. So if you're off in your hollybobs, just be aware. In the UK, it's used as a sanitizer in hot tubs where high temperatures can make chlorine less effective, and it's also a bit less smelly than chlorine and kinder to our skin and to our eyes. So that's obviously another reason why it's used there. It's also used as a flame retardant in furniture and upholstery. So always open windows and have good ventilation when you get new furniture, so that smell and the gas can be got rid of. Okay, so testing. Okay. Controversial is testing. However, there's some new research that has come out, so I'm going to update you with everything here today. So iodine testing is indicative only. It isn't conclusive. It's good for when people want to do research on broad populations or regional studies to see trends, but it's not accurate enough at an individual level to confirm your iodine status when you only do one isolated sample. So it's only reflecting your recent intake, so what you've taken in the past 24 to 48 hours, rather than your long-term thyroid iodine status. But it is the best that we've got and is considered more useful than using blood, as iodine is obviously excreted via urine, so obviously easier to test it. Now, testing can be useful if you are concerned about your overall level, as you may be vegan or vegetarian and you're not eating many iodine-rich foods, for example, or you're pregnant and you want to make sure that your iodine levels are okay. Now, if you do wish to test, there are two types. There is a 24-hour loading test. This is where you take a large dose of iodine and you collect all your urine over a 24-hour period. If less iodine is excreted, that it correlates to having a lower iodine status because you've retained as much, so your body needs it. Now, it's believed that over 90% of nutritional dose of iodine is actually excreted in the urine, so that's why that can help there. But this test isn't suitable if you're on any replacement thyroid hormone medication for children, or if you've got an inflamed thyroid, you've got high thyroglobulin antibodies, you've got Graves', or you've got thyroid nodules. So the other test that's available is a random urine iodine or a spot test, and this is best for those who are on thyroid medications. Now, best results, it should be done first thing in the morning in a fasted state using your first morning void, so that first wee in the morning. And you don't need a special diet required prior to the test either. Now, hydration does affect the results, so the results should always be corrected with creatinine, and most labs do this already. So aim for a mean or average result of the reference range. Now, bear in mind that this test isn't perfect either, and you would likely need to do the test at least 10 times to get just a 20% accuracy. We're not going to do that. Most people have got to spend that sort of money all that time. So, but it is the best that we have, along with taking an iodine intake assessment. So having a look at all your food sources, all your supplements, etc., and seeing what your intake is likely to be. And that's probably the best option. Saves you a few quid as well. And actually thinking, am I bringing in enough iodine through my foods or supplements? To obviously provide enough for my overall body's needs. Now, the skin patch test, which used to involve applying iodine to the skin and observing how quickly it disappeared, is now not scientifically valid. The fading of iodine from the skin is influenced by several factors such as air temperature, air pressure, skin absorption, and also environmental conditions. So, and only about 80% of iodine, 88% of iodine evaporates from the skin anyway. So it can only leave about 12% that actually penetrates. So it's not a true or reliable assessment for your iodine status, and that's why it's been defunct now. So finally, here's some things you can do to help keep your iodine levels a little bit more consistent and mitigate any excess exposure. So looking at diet and supplementation, try to have the maximum daily intake or no more than that. So that's 150 micrograms from all sources. So that's looking at your diet and your supplemental iodine that you might be in multivitamins. So try to avoid the extremes and excesses. And if you're pregnant, then keep within the 250 micrograms RDA as well during pregnancy and breastfeeding. Include those cruciferous vegetables and selenium-rich foods daily, so those Brazil nuts, etc. And also just be cautious with thyroid support supplements that contain kelp or Irish moss or bladderwrack seaweeds, as they, like we talked about earlier, they can contain extremely high and inconsistent amounts, which is way over the 300 microgram maximum there. Now, the other option is, what can you do to reduce your chemical goitrogen exposure? So try and use a fluoride-free toothpaste or in a mouthwash. A good brand there is Dent. You can find that in Holland and Barrett, a few supermarkets. I think it's in Sainsbury's. And, so easy to look for. Filter your tap water. Try and get rid of as many of those chemicals that's added in there as possible. And obviously, depending on your budget, there's different types of tap water filtration systems. You can have your countertop, like a Bristol water filter, through to osmosis and all the other things as well, or those that are fitted to your cold water taps as they're coming into your house. Try to shower immediately after you've been in chlorinated pool use. There's some products from Try Swim that are formulated to try and help remove the chlorine off your skin and also get rid of that smell as well of the skin and your hair. As I said earlier, ventilate the rooms with new furniture to get rid of any chemical off-gassing, and try and use natural cosmetic, personal care and household cleaning products where possible. And again, see Dr. See Dr. Alan Christiansen's list online as well to help there. So just to summarise everything today, what we talked about, iodine is essential, but only in that just right range. Both low and excess levels can be problematic, and an excess is more prevalent than a true deficiency. So once you've gone beyond that maximum range, the effects can show up in a multitude of things, and we talked about a few of those there. Watch your seaweed consumption, as it contains very high and very variable amounts of iodine. Antioxidants such as selenium and glutathione are absolutely key to thyroid gland health and function. It's absolutely fine to eat your raw cruciferous vegetables, but do minimise your chemical goitrogen exposure, and just keep to the 150 micrograms or 250 if you're pregnant and breastfeeding from all sources. So thank you very much for your time today. I hope you found the session useful. Just before we dive into questions, I've got a free gift for you. It's my thyroid-friendly 7-day meal plan, which is complete with breakfasts, lunches, dinners and snacks that are all gluten, dairy and soy and added sugar free. It's also got some top tips and meal prep for meal prepping and a handy shopping list. You can download it by scanning the QR code on screen, or from my website, thethyroidnutritionist.com. And I've also got some other free resources on there, such as an energy recipe book to help mitigate those mid-afternoon energy slumps, a weight loss guide for those in their 40s and beyond, and podcast episodes on perimenopause. And if you want support to put the basics of diet, digestion, liver support, sleep and stress resilience all in place to improve your thyroid and overall health, then my Kickstart group program can help you do this in just 30 days. There's also weekly live Q&A sessions included in the program as well. So see the website for more information, and you can join the waitlist there so you can get an exclusive £50 discount as well. And we're starting on Monday the 8th of June. Thank you.
Thanks ever such a lot, Caroline. There was a lot to take in there, I think.
There is. I'm sorry. I tried to make it as clear as possible.
No,
hopefully.
I know. I think some of the, the slides that the one that you made up, sort of like a summary of seeing where we should be, that was brilliant, I think. So I think once people get your slides as well, that will help them to digest a bit more, because it is a complicated topic. It really is, iodine. So so that was brilliant. We've only got one question so far, which is, how do we know we have reached the 250 microgram of iodine from our food? That is for pregnant ladies, though, is that right? The 250?
250, yeah. Yes, that would be if you're pregnant.
Oh,
or
and she's added on the end, sorry, or 150
Oh.
for normal people. Can you
Right.
please give us an example of what foods and quantity?
Right.
I don't know if there's a list somewhere that you have. I might be able to send to people.
There is a list on your website. So if they go to Thyroid UK's website, they can see that. There is also a list on the British Dietetics Association's website as well. So if you just do a search and look for iodine on there, that should hopefully come up there. And I think some good foods, I think, were on my slides. Just to find them. But eggs would be a really good thing. So if you do eat eggs, there's 24 micrograms of iodine in eggs. And I think there's also I think obviously we're careful with seaweed. Dairy, it's very hard to know exactly how much is going to be in dairy products. I would also look at the milk. It should be listed in the nutrition facts or the ingredients label on the back of the milk. If you've got if you're doing you're doing alternative plant-based milks, for example, then again, some are fortified and they will say, on the back, you turn it over, have a look at it, and it will say iodine if it's got iodine in them. So some are actually putting iodine in them at the moment. But obviously my view with those is just watch if they've got any other ingredients in, like thickeners, gums, and all that sort of bits and pieces, because they're not great for us. So try and have one with as minimum ingredients as possible, maybe 2 or 3 ingredients maximum, and would be that. So I think it's really having a look at all of your food sources, have a look at those websites, and sort of top them up on a daily basis, or typical foods that you generally have. And that might be a good way of doing it. The other side of the coin is, if you are taking a multivitamin, again, it will list how much of each nutrient is in the recommended dose, whether that's 1, 2 capsules or whatever the dose is for that. And again, that you can have a look under iodine. It will say how much it's having per the 2 or the 1 capsule, for example. Most supplements in the UK have around the 100 to 150 micrograms. There are a few that don't have any iodine in there. So there's a few ones that don't have iodine in there as well. So if you want, I can add a list of those.
Yeah, please. That would be great. Because I'm always asked that. I did find one, but if you're probably better at that than I am, you probably know more. So that would be great if you could perhaps add a page to your presentation. Is that okay? And then I can send that out.
No problem.
We won't be sending them out quite yet. We have to get the webinar edited, and that takes a few days as well. So, but then everybody will get a copy of your presentation. So
super.
Brilliant.
And if anybody's got any questions as a result of going back through in a slower pace, and if you've got any more questions that do come up, then you can always reach out to me. My email is on the last slide right at the bottom. It's there.
So Shirley McKeman, who said, "Thank you, Caroline. I've received your meal plan and look forward to starting. How exciting!" So that's lovely.
Oh, brilliant.
I might
Lovely.
go for it myself as well. Okay, thank you. Oh, she said beautiful photography. Many thanks. Okay, thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much, and I'll see
Okay,
you
no
again
problem.
soon. Take care.
Okay, take care. Lovely
Bye.
to see everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
So our next speaker is Julia Priestley, who is the CEO of British Thyroid Foundation. They are running the James Lind Alliance Priority Setting Partnership. It's something that we've wanted for such a long time and couldn't afford it, to be blunt. But we are so pleased that they managed to raise the funds to do this, and that I'm on the steering committee. So I'm just so happy about this, and Julia is going to explain a little bit about it. You've probably seen some things perhaps on different charity websites and posts on socials, but Julia's just going to explain just a little bit about it.
Hello everybody, my name's Julia Priestley. I'm the CEO of the British Thyroid Foundation. Thank you very much to Lynn and Thyroid UK for inviting me to talk to you about this really exciting new project by which we're encouraging you all to contribute to the future of thyroid research. And this is the James Lind Alliance Priority Setting Partnership on Thyroid Disease. So first of all, who was James Lind? The Alliance was named after the pioneer of clinical trials. He was a Scottish naval surgeon who was the first person to notice that sailors who spend long periods of time at sea developed scurvy. And at that time, in the 1700s, there were lots of conflicting ideas about how to treat this deadly disease. And it was his hypothesis that it was possibly something related to diet. So kind of very relevant about following on from all these talks we've had this afternoon about nutrition. And possibly his thought was that it was to do with fresh fruit and nuts. And so he allocated 2 sailors to each of 6 different treatments for a period of 14 days. And his trial showed that oranges and lemons were dramatically better than the other supposed treatments at that time. And this is how the very first clinical trial was performed, where vitamin C as a treatment for scurvy was identified. And the James Lind Alliance was set up in 2004. It's an independent non-profit initiative whose infrastructure is funded and supported by the National Institute of Health and Care Research, or the NIHR. And their mission is simple. It's to bring together patients, carers and clinicians in priority setting partnerships to identify the most important unanswered questions in a particular health condition or social care setting. And they've done this successfully for over 200 conditions. And the top 10 priorities, which are published at the end of a partnership, often are used to guide major research funding. So what are the PSPs? Well, they bring together people who use healthcare services, their carers, families and loved ones, health and social care professionals, and everybody. This is the main principle: everybody has an equal voice, and this doesn't usually happen in research. And the purpose is that they identify the uncertainties in the evidence or the unanswered research questions. The PSPs are funded by charities, often by rural colleges of health professionals, and sometimes by universities. So I think we would all agree that this is the right time for a thyroid disease PSP. We're all seeing increasing frustration from patients who still struggle despite treatment. They struggle to get access to the treatments, alternative treatments, and clinicians are also calling for clearer evidence to guide the care that they're giving. In some areas of thyroid disease, for example, Graves' disease and thyroid eye disease, there are some really exciting new therapies that are emerging. But we know that we need much more good quality research to understand more about which groups of patients may benefit from them and why. Thyroid disease, as you know, affects millions of people, and research in this area has tragically been and historically been underfunded. In many cases, the treatments haven't changed for 8 or 9 decades. Patients are still struggling with symptoms, they're struggling to access timely diagnosis, treatments, and we urgently need better research to improve the care and the quality of life and the outcomes of people living with these conditions. So we at the British Thyroid Foundation and Lynn at Thyroid UK and her colleagues, we've for a long time now we spend a lot of our time thinking of ways to raise awareness about thyroid disease and to push it up the research agenda. But we're small charities, and with limited resources, it's often really hard to feel that our voice is ever being heard. So this is our chance. When we were fortunate enough to get the funding from the Peter Sowerby Trust, that meant that we could go ahead, and I reached out straight away to Lynn because I knew that it was on their mind as well to do a Thyroid James Lind Alliance, and to be a success I knew that we'd have to encourage the whole patient community to work together. The PSP is overseen by a steering group which is made up of a wide range of experts and patients who've all got experience of many different thyroid disorders, and the purpose is that we all work together to make sure that the partnership is as representative as possible. Dr. Jo Watson is an experienced JLA chair, and she keeps us focused on ensuring that we engage widely, in particular to get the views of people whose voices are not usually heard. This is a picture from our first meeting, which was some of the people involved in the steering committee. There were also 2 who joined us online because they were based overseas, and we meet regularly. We've been meeting every month since February, and a small group of us meets fortnightly as well to make sure that we kind of push this forward. And the steering committee has a responsibility for agreeing the key documents, for example, the scope of the project, what's to be included in it, and just as importantly, what's not to be included in it, and also the design of the consultation survey. And really importantly as well, we have a number of partner organisations who are helping us raise awareness about the project and making sure as many people as possible are able to take part in it. So ITT and the Thyroid Trust, the WREN project and TED-CT are some of the other patient organisations, but we're also working with professional organisations from around the UK who can help make sure that we have the clinical and surgical expertise as well. We want research questions from common thyroid disorders like hypothyroidism, but also we don't want to forget the rare thyroid disorders, which are so often neglected. You can find out more about our steering group by following that link on the screen and the other resources on our website. And here's how the process works. First of all, we have launched a survey which is now open. Probably some of you have seen it, where anybody can submit questions that they feel need answering. It's not like a traditional questionnaire where you are asked questions. We asking you to pose the questions. And next we will analyse and group these questions into categories, and then there'll be a second survey on which people can vote on the most important ones, and that will get the short list to about 25 or 30 questions. And finally there'll be a workshop which will take place next June, I think, and that will be a live meeting. There will be about 30 people taking part in that meeting. At least half of them will be patients. And once it's published, these priorities, the top 10 which have been agreed at that workshop by consensus, will be shared widely with researchers and funders. And to give you a sense of what questions people might be asking, here are some examples. On the survey, you'll see there are 3 boxes. You might just have one question, or you might complete all 3 boxes, or you might have many more than that, and there's a comment box in which you can add any further questions you have to it. Some people are responding with a narrative with a kind of description of what their experience have been and their frustrations are. And the job of the information specialist will be to tease apart questions from that to make sure that however people have responded to the survey, the points that the relevant questions that that they're raising can be used and added to the survey, categorized. Your lived experience is really essential. You know what it's like to navigate the symptoms and the treatments and the healthcare system. Clinicians and researchers bring expertise, but only patients can describe the day-to-day reality. So this PSP will only work if people like you can take part. If you've ever felt that your symptoms were dismissed or misunderstood, and I know that many people with thyroid disorders do feel this every day because we hear from them, this is your chance to be heard. So please do get involved. So what will happen next? The survey will be open until about the 22nd of June. We're keeping an eye on this, and we'll give notice if we close it any earlier than that. But we've had thousands of responses already, and we've got a fixed amount of resources, so we want to make sure that we can the responses we're getting are manageable. So that's why we're kind of encouraging you to kind of get on and answer it now. The information specialist, who's an independent person who's been appointed from the Cardiff University, she's already started working through the responses. It's really exciting how many we're getting through. Her job is to clean up the data set, to remove out of scope submissions, so things that kind of are defined not in with the scope of the project, and then to decide how to deal with those questions. So we won't be throwing anything away. If we get a number of questions that are out of scope, we'll be categorizing them elsewhere, and we'll do what we can to work out how we best to respond to them. And then the in-scope submissions will be categorized and formatted into summary questions, and then they'll be checked against the existing evidence. So remember, we're looking for unanswered questions. And these will be put together in a long list of summary questions, which will probably about 50 to 60 questions, and they will go out in a second survey questionnaire that will go out in the autumn, and we'll be asking people to prioritize those. So we end up with about a top 25 to 30 questions are the most popular voted upon questions as to which should be put forward to the final workshop. So it will be patients, carers and healthcare professionals voting on these important questions. The researchers can't get involved. They're conflicted. The 25 to 30 shortlisted questions will be taken to the final workshop, which probably will take place at somewhere in London, and we will publish information about how people can apply to be part of that day. As I said, it will be at least 50% of the people who take part in that day will be patients. And on that day, they will work together with healthcare professionals as well to identify to agree the top 10 questions. All of the questions, whether they're within or without the top 10, will be published. So even if a question that perhaps you put forward comes at number 15, it will be published and disseminated so that future researchers, if they're kind of interested in that question, they can pick that one up too. So really the idea is that nothing is lost. Here's a timeline of our PSP. You'll see, so we're currently at the initial consultation stage. The survey will close June or early July, and then they'll be summarising and organising the responses for the initial prioritisation survey, which will go out in November, and hopefully that final prioritisation workshop will take place in March, with publication date in June. These dates are not fixed; it will just depend. At the moment, so far we've had a really large volume of responses. So if we need a little, we move the timeline forward a little bit, we'll do that because we don't want to waste this opportunity. And what happens once the top 10 is published? The results will be shared with researchers and funders, and these prioritised will guide future research investment. Hopefully it will attract new research at the area of thyroid disease, and it will lead to new and better treatments and better care. These priorities don't guarantee future research, but having an agreed set of priorities should certainly put the researchers in a stronger position to attract the funding that they need to move things forward. As you all will appreciate, getting research funding is extremely challenging, and often projects will be turned down from funding because the people reviewing it and funding will say, well, actually, how do you know that that's what people really want? The purpose of the benefit of a PSP is that the researchers will be able to go to funders and say, look, the whole community has come together in this kind of in this agreed consensus process, and this is what they agreed. So they'll be kind of quite a long way along the journey. And having spoken to other people who are involved in these, have been involved in these PSPs in the past, the clinicians will often say actually they thought they knew what were the research priorities and were surprised when the priorities that the patients identified as being the important unanswered questions were not the same. And so this brilliant process actually matches the two up together, and it will be agreed between them. There won't be the priorities will not be just the ones that the doctors and the clinicians thought were important, but they will really reflect what the patients wanted to. And here's a couple of lovely quotes that I wanted to share from two people who are involved in previous PSPs. That I won't read them out to you, but you can see that the whole benefit of this is that patients and carers, family members can give their loved ones a voice, and also that this also reflects that a healthcare professional is also saying actually it really changed his or her idea about how care should be delivered. So that we're really hoping that the community will kind of learn from each other about how to move things forward. So taking part in the survey is really simple. You can follow this QR code, you can go to our website. The social media of all our organisations is promoting it widely at the moment. So please share it with friends, family, your healthcare professionals. We have posters. If you have somewhere that you can put up a poster or give out flyers, just get in touch with us and we can send them out to you to share. If you have a doctor's surgery or a community organisation that might put up one of these posters for you, so more people get to see it, perhaps more people who wouldn't normally come across an opportunity like this because they wouldn't be in the forums or engage with patient organisations. We really want to hear those voices too. And you can also volunteer to join the to take part in the prioritisation workshop if you'd like to be more involved and follow the process through, and sign up for updates as well. So you can either do that by contacting us if you've already completed the survey, or if you haven't yet completed the survey, there's a chance at the end to say that you'd like to remain in touch. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Lynn, for inviting me to give to talk about this really exciting opportunity. Really look forward to following this process through. It's lovely working with Lynn and the other patients and carers who are involved, and the other professionals. We have a psychologist, we have endocrinologists, pediatric and adult, and we have an economist as well who's particularly interested in the impact on the workplace and working place engagement of thyroid patients, and this isn't usually looked at, so we're really delighted that they're involved too. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Julia. That's really good. I think it's quite clear as well, so people properly understand the process, why we're doing it, and I really hope that if you haven't already completed the survey, please do go and share it to your family, friends, work colleagues, the companies you work for. Some major companies have things, especially for employees, they have meetings and things like that. So if you could ask them if they would be willing to put something on the board for employees, things like that. We really need, people to come forward and put their questions. As Julia said, this is our possibly only opportunity for a long time to be able to do something like this and be involved and actually have the questions answered that we really want answered. So thanks ever such a lot, Julia. That's really good. So as I say, I'm really pleased. I think we've had a few people say how it's, let's have a look. I think there was a saying how interesting it is. It says, how do you recruit the HCPs, the partners?
So the people who are on the steering committee, the purpose of the people on the steering committee, they don't decide the ultimate priorities. They're not allowed to take part in the final workshop, actually. They're there to make sure that the survey and the process is representative of the community. So, for example, we've got people from the BTA, people from the British Association of Endocrine Thyroid Surgeons, people who are involved in the RCGP, people who are work in the academic world of economics, psychology, health psychology. So the idea is that they can help disseminate this piece of work around their communities, and we've got a nurse specialist as well. So it's not that they were people that we knew who were actively involved in those worlds and have an active interest in thyroid disease as well, and had a capacity, of course, because we know how busy everybody is. Mm. And there was also a question about how do we make sure that less common thyroid disorders get a fair hearing. That's a really good point. So you can imagine most patients have hypothyroidism, and so that most of the questions will be from people who have that diagnosis. But there are also people and researchers as well, patients and families and researchers whose family member have a very rare thyroid disorder. So the idea is that, I mean, I imagine a lot of the questions that come through will be similar in a lot of the categories, but from what we've been told from our JLA advisor, she says that it's not uncommon at all for, say, something that had only one or two questions about it. So kind of, for example, in our case, that we were thinking about a rare thyroid disorder, that might only have one or two questions, but actually that could make it all the way through to the final final workshop, because maybe 400 of the responses are about hypothyroidism, and many will kind of come under similar themes. So that's the purpose of theming, putting everything into categories. And if actually there might only be one response about MCT8 deficiency, for example, but somebody's posing a question that hasn't yet been answered by research, that could make its way through the whole process and make it to the top 10. And that's what that's how the process balances out the more common concerns with the rare ones. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, the rest is sort of saying thank you. How do you balance maybe maybe a low representation of less common disorders? I think you've kind of answered that one, really, haven't you?
Yes, I think that, yeah.
Oh,
and then somebody else asking about sharing them. So yeah, please, if you'd like any posters, just get in touch with the BTF. There's an email address at the end of the questionnaire where you can email us and ask for posters, and we will send them out to you free of charge. So posters and flyers to hand out and give out to people, and particularly if any of you have any you work with people from different communities who possibly wouldn't access the BTF normally, wouldn't hear about this otherwise, but would really like to hear from those underrepresented communities to make sure that their voice is a part of this process as well.
I think that's it. No more questions for you, Julia. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and doing this for us, because I think it's very important. We all think it's very important, don't we? So thank you very much. So much. Thanks a lot. Have a good rest of the day. Okay, so next up is Tara Riddle from, she's the co-lead of the Improved Thyroid Treatment Group, and Mary Saunders is also going to help. They're going to tell you about the T3 campaign that they are running.
A tiny thing about me first, in case anyone really needed to know. I was diagnosed as hyperthyroid in 1987, had several courses of anti-thyroid drugs, but I relapsed each time they were stopped. So I was given radioactive iodine and was very, very hypothyroid then. I was told, take this thyroxine tablet every day, you'll be fine. And I was actually for about 25 years. And in 2014, I started to become very ill, not being able to stand unsupported. In the end, awful brain fog, had to give up driving, lots and lots of other symptoms. I saw 3 consultants, had endless investigations and blood tests. But then I learned about T3 on Thyroid UK's website and their Health Unlocked forum. And after nearly 2 years, I finally persuaded a consultant that she might like to consider me having a trial and of T3. And for me, it was absolutely transformational. There was no other word for it. And sadly, I know there are other healers here today who've got similar experiences. So this is hence my passion to push for access to T3 for anyone who needs it. Won't suit everyone, but for those who need it, it's crucial. And then I came across ITT, Improved Thyroid Treatment Group online, and Thyroid Support Group Norfolk, both at the same time in 2017. T3 was being stopped, as you probably know, after the extortionate 6,000% price hike. In Norfolk, our group campaigned for 3 years to get it reinstated on the Norfolk formulary, a very long, hard journey, and we won. So my retirement from being an infant school teacher has kind of turned into a campaigner, which wasn't my plan. And of course, we know that Thyroid UK was already campaigning on this way before ITT even came into existence. And thanks to Mary for being here, because she'll add things as we go along when I forget them, because I might do. ITT started because of, as we all know, so many people get frustrated with thyroid health and the struggles with thyroid health. Diagnosis often takes far too long, sometimes even decades. There's inadequate training, insufficient testing, failure to understand the significance of blood tests or blood test results, and little regard for persistent symptoms, and failure to give appropriate or individualized treatment. And it's pretty bad, isn't it? Can be really, really bad. So in ITT planned that we could get together as many people as we could really make a voice be heard. And we went straight into campaigning because really for T3, because that was urgent at the time because of the NHS consultation, where they really were hoping to remove T3, I think, completely. But with pressure from thyroid groups, T3 was kept in secondary care for consultants to prescribe. Then in 2018, ITT joined forces with Thyroid UK, Thyroid Trust, BTF, the Norfolk group, and 2 other smaller groups. And we met Lord Hunt at the Lords. He's been our champion ever since. And we had a lot of support from the then BTA president. And we compiled a dossier. It was something around 90 pages to present to the Department of Health about how CCGs were not following NHS guidance and patients just could not access T3. And then we did quite a few other projects with the collaborative groups. We managed to get some crucial changes into the RMOC T3 guidance because the draft was awful. We compiled ITT, well, our wonderful Helga, who is a whiz kid on data. She is just data queen. She analyses the data from ICBs, CCGs then, and to actually find out how many people or how many areas are refusing T3 prescribing. And then we've been reviewing that every year really for several years. And we've done our own things as well, like the NICE submission to NICE and submission to the Women's Health Strategy. But more of our work's been done recently with the joint groups, which has definitely had more power, I think. In 2022, NHSE said they were going to review their policy items which should not routinely be prescribed in primary care. And the joint groups met NHS England online to discuss the need for greater clarity. We said it was vital because there was so much confusion on the part of ICBs and clinicians. And we met them online, and they assured us that they would make things abundantly clear. But then August 2023, they published 2 documents on the same day. One was called Lidothioneine Advice for Prescribers, which details how it can be used and who should use it, who can prescribe it, etc. And the other one was the updated policy. And these 2 documents completely contradicted each other, because the policy said, or still says, do not initiate and deprescribe in patients currently prescribed this medicine. So one NHS document says, here's the way to use it. Some people need it. And the other one says, take it away from everybody and don't start them on it. So we tried extremely hard to get NHSE to engage with us, because this contradiction was just absolutely ridiculous. But they refused to engage any further. They said they'd spoken to us for the year before. They didn't want to hear us again. Well, 2025, we'd had enough, and still getting patients every day. I'm sure Lynn is the same. Patients every day saying, I can't access T3, or it's been taken from me. So we pushed very, very hard in 2025 with Thyroid UK, and we finally got some crucial wording changed in the policy document. So they don't just say, for the T3 section this is, they don't just say do not initiate, but they now say do not initiate in primary care, which is a help. And the phrase deprescribe in patients currently prescribed this item, that was removed from the T3 section. So that was a big win, but the wording still remains as at the top to cover all items in that policy. I think there are about 15 other items, something like that. So it still contradicts its own other piece of guidance. Now, this change in wording was sent, we know this, it was sent twice to the regional pharmacists last year, so that all the regions know, in England, all the regions know that that prescribing should be allowed initiated in secondary care, and then if it's successful trial, passed on to a GP in primary care. And it shouldn't be removed or changed until you've had a review by a consultant. And if you've already had a review, you don't need another one. Well, NHS finally engaged with us when we challenged them so strongly on it. And ITT asked all their members to write to NHS England, and we asked them to ask their MPs to do the same. So there was quite a lot of pressure put on. And it did have some effect, but we're still trying in 2026, so this is 3 years later, we're still trying to get things clarified better. And what we're trying to do with Thyroid UK, BTF, Thyroid Trust, we've all asked NHS England to take T3 out of their overarching policy because it just doesn't fit there. It's just not needed. We emailed them a long letter in February, no response. We sent another chasing email to them, no response. Then ITT reviewed all the 42 ICB formularies again with our lovely Helga, and showed that 33 out of the 42 ICBs don't comply with NHS guidance. So in February, with Thyroid UK and the Thyroid Trust again, ITT wrote to NHS England urging them to take action against regarding ICBs not compliant. We thought perhaps if it came from the top, that would be best. No response, NHS England, nothing. So from February to April this year, we've sent submissions. They're not really letters, they're very long submissions to all the 33 ICBs that don't follow the NHSE guidance, the advice for prescribers document, following up all the responses and a lot of the responses were awful, so inadequate, and we had to do another one back to them. We had one response came from NHS England about this, and they said we should contact our GP. So you can tell that NHS England don't actually read what they're sent. But just a few, have agreed to review their policies, or they say they're going to, and update the formularies. So it's a watch this space at the moment. We thought, I know what we'll do. ITT and Thyroid did something similar. We submitted a formal question in March to the NHS England board meeting, asking when will they remove T3 from their contradictory NHSE policy. The verbal reply was extremely unhelpful at the meeting, didn't answer the question at all. So ITT emailed a very strong written response back. Their written reply, was that the policy was reviewed in the last few months and it was decided not to make any changes. So we have sent an even stronger response, and we're awaiting the outcome. With Thyroid UK and Thyroid Trust, we're currently submitting a detailed report to, as Lynn said, it was going to be West Streeting, but it won't be now, and it'll probably go next week, about to the Department of Health about the ICBs not being compliant with NHSE guidance, requesting, well, sending quite a few strong requests, but we don't quite know if it's going to bear fruit, but we are taking it higher and taking it higher. I don't know where we go after that. Future plans. ITT itself, we are focusing still on T3 because we have to win this battle, but we know there's lots more wrong with thyroid care. Much is wrong with it. Lack of shared decision making between clinician and patient, lack of access to NDT, etc. Failure to take symptoms into account properly, the focus on TSH and never mind your thyroid hormone levels. But ITT is a small team and we can only do so much. And it is painfully slow to get NHSE to listen to concerns and let alone act upon them. I'm going to ask Mary now if I've missed anything. I've tried to do it quickly because in case you want questions. Is there anything that you think to add?
You've covered everything that we wanted to present, I think. Yeah. I
think regarding supporting the T3 campaign, anyone can do it. You can write to your own ICB, write to the MP if you want things to change. We wrote to Dorset ICB with very strong evidence that they should align their T3 policy with NHS guidance. And an IT member has been fighting this very strongly herself as well. And now Dorset says it is conducting a review which will seek to address the issues on their formulary. That's another watch this space. And several other ICBs have suggested they may make some positive or small changes, but that is in the pipeline. We shall be collating these, I think. So we've got a big spreadsheet of who said what and who's actually going to do anything. So join us in ITT. Would love to have you. We're currently an online Facebook group, but a website is being planned. We've got template letters for members to use. We're detailing all national guidance and the statements in Parliament on T3. I mean, it's a lot for ICBs to ignore, we feel. We've got a public ITT page with similar posts on it, and we'd love you to follow us there. More followers, the better. And then we've got more, the greater influence we'll have with more followers, I think. Certainly become a member of Thyroid UK. The more members they have is the better, to add pressure. And Thyroid UK also has its wonderful forum, go on there every day, Health Unlocked, and you can just get the best advice on there. I would also say that Thyroid Trust is also a great, relatively new charity, and we know that donations to Thyroid UK and to Thyroid Trust are hugely welcomed, because these charities are invaluable and a small charity needs support. And I think, Lynn, I know I can't see you, but I think you're still collecting stories from people if they've got problems.
Yeah, we've had a couple while I've been away. I think obviously I haven't had a chance to. I've got many emails to go through next week.
Sure.
So yeah, so stories will be good because we may need to use them. I think I'm going to be in touch with Lord Hunt again because he's been really helpful. And what I want to do is press for another debate. The only trouble is at the moment, government is just in difficulties.
There isn't a word, is there?
So yeah, that's what we want to do going forward. I just thought that they might be interested in some of the responses that we got, for instance, and some of the things that they're doing. They're adding things. They're putting barriers in the ICBs. They're putting barriers in, such as having to fill out great big forms to be able to access T3. And so in some of the correspondence, we've said, you're doing this. And one of them actually came back and said, well, there's nothing to say that we can't add these things in.
Yeah.
We say it's not in the guidance. And they're saying, yeah, but there's nothing in there to say that we can't add barriers or add things like this. There's all sorts of things, isn't there, that they're adding that causes issues to stop people accessing it. It's just amazing when you see the answers and what they're doing, the things that they're doing. It's just so awful, but hopefully we'll push on and push on and push on.
We certainly push on. I mean, it's hard work. Mary will attest to that. Mary joined our team last year, and she's never.
No, I think Mary's been brilliant.
Nonsense.
I mean,
Mary
for us
is
here,
brilliant.
people think we're a big organisation, but there's only 3 of us.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get it because we deal with a lot of things as well as you do, but with T3, and because we're a charity, there's so much paperwork that we have to check, GDPR and all sorts of things. So but this is our main campaign, and it's been lovely working with ITT on this. I think it's
good.
But it is hard work to, writing all these things, and to be honest, you've been doing most of the writing, and I sort of double check and make, well, perhaps we should change this and perhaps we should change that. I'm a little bit more, but I think it's been good actually that you've pushed a little bit harder. In other words, the language has changed a little bit to how I've always worked.
I think it has. Yeah, I think it has. But we don't have trustees. We're just us. We don't have. We're not a charity. We don't have trustees, so we can say what we like, really. I mean, we do try and be polite. I think we do stay polite.
No,
even
you
though
do.
We're extremely frustrated.
Yeah. But I think that's been a little bit, it's better, I think, at the moment, just try and push a little bit more. So, yeah, we'll keep going. But, I mean, donations would be great. Things like, for us, things like this, it's going to be recorded and then put out. That costs us money. So to have it edited and make it done properly, because we don't have the skills here. So, yeah, thank you for saying about the donations, because it's really easy to do, and when I put my presentation thing up at the end, it will show you how you can do that. But thank you so much. Did you have anything extra to say?
I was just going to answer.
Not really, just to say, we do have to be quite resilient. So it is a hard struggle, and I don't think we shouldn't have to use stronger language. I think we have remained completely professional, obviously, but I think when faced with basically dead ends that we are presented with quite often, it's just unbelievable sometimes that so many, like with yourselves and other groups of Thyroid Trust, where we feel like our requests are perfectly logical and should be obvious, but quite often it just falls on deaf ears. As Tara said, it's like the NHSE aren't able to listen, but so that's where the resilience comes in. But we'll keep fighting, because we're patients too, and we will keep going. But yeah, if people are able to support in any way they can, like sending their own stories to yourselves, or when we ask for people to contact their MP or whatever, if any of our members are on and they can just get involved, doesn't have to be a long involved letter, but just to, even if they send a copy of one of our letters and just say, you know, I am having this particular problem, please can you help sort this out? That would be really, really helpful. The more voices, the better.
I think one of the things that we haven't mentioned is the cost. You know, it went up 6,000%, and that was something like £284 for 28 tablets in those days. Now it's come right down to, is it 33? 28.
It's come down about 90%.
So we shouldn't, it shouldn't be in the policy about cost anymore.
No, it isn't about cost. It's almost as though doctors or ICBs or whoever think of it as some sort of black magic. You know, it's just, we have all these rules about it. Yeah. And it's dangerous. And of course, it's not. Any drug is dangerous if you use it wrongly. But no, I've been here 10 years on my T3, and I didn't want to be here. I mean, in fact, I don't think I would have been here if I hadn't learned it from Thyroid UK. I really don't. I'll do one tiny anecdote because I know my daughter's watching. She was expecting twins in 2016 before I got my T3, and I went with her to an antenatal appointment, and she had to help me. She had to help me to walk into the to the office and sit me down somewhere because I couldn't do it. And then look at me now doing all this.
Good job you are.
Oh, Tara, you've done amazing, I must say. You were a bit worried about this, but you've done so well.
We are a good team. The ICT, what we call ourselves, the team, sort of co-leads. There are 5 of us who are working together a lot at the moment, and it's hard work. Sometimes one of us will take a break because we're just bogged out, bombarded with the nonsense, really. But
well,
we
thank
keep
you
going.
so much.
We're not going to let them win.
No, I mean, there's been a couple of comments from Rebecca. I'm so grateful to you both, all of the others who are taking this vital work forward. It's evident it's a huge amount of time and effort for you, and sounds an exhausting and frustrating process. So a heartfelt thank you. I'm happy to join this effort. Our voices need to be heard and acknowledged, and policies need to change. And Debbie said, I thought NHS England's being scrapped. It is. And I think that's part of the problem, that we're not getting responses because they're so busy dealing with the outcome of them being closed down. I think it's ridiculous, but well, we'll see.
We fight on. We fight on, Lynn.
Yeah, we will. Okay, so any questions, you can sort of go to the ITT Facebook page or send me an email to enquiries@thyroiduk.org, and we'll pass them along or whatever. So we've got to finish now.
Can I just say one thing very, very quickly? Because somebody's just mentioned a private prescription, and quite often people say, I've given up on the NHS, I'm just getting my medication privately, which always concerns me a little bit, because if you end up in a care home, or if you end up in hospital and you're not actually able to state your own needs, even if you have to hand over your medication usually if you're under their care, and they won't necessarily continue to prescribe your T3, but just when you most might need it. So it's just a cautionary word really to say, just be careful about relying on private sources, even if it's a verifiable source, because you can't always assume that you'll always be able to get what you need when you're in a vulnerable position. Sorry, I just wanted to add that.
No, that's fine. In fact, I would add to that to say that anybody who is A, purchasing it themselves online, or B, getting it from a private doctor who is not informing your doctor, really it's skewing any figure work, any data, it's skewing. So I would always suggest you let your GP know that you are accessing T3 because the NHS won't give it to you, and you want it on record that you are receiving T3 from outside the NHS. Because I think they're saying not many people need it, but I think a lot of that is because the data doesn't show how many people are on it on the NHS. So yeah, thank you ever such a lot, Mary and Tara.
That's okay.
See you again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Lynn.
Okay, so on to the next one. It's our last speaker. It's Lisa, and she's a mindfulness teacher and holistic life coach, and she's going to talk about mindfulness, living well with chronic illness. So I'm in favour of mindfulness. I think it can really help sometimes, especially when you've got a lot of stress going on in your life. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here with Thyroid UK as part of the Awareness Week. So thank you very much. I myself have a thyroid condition, and before I start, I'm just going to have to warn you, I'm a little bit brain foggy today.
Okay.
I did want to join a bit earlier to see more of the talks, but I've tried to just rest my brain so I can get through this talk without just talking nonsense. But please just be a little patient with me and bear with me if I mix my words up a bit.
Okay.
Okay, so yes, thyroid condition that I have, and I expect most of you also have one or know someone who does. So yeah, we can all appreciate the important work that Thyroid UK do. So yeah, grateful to be here and grateful for everyone here who's giving up their time. So for the next half an hour, I'm just going to share a little bit about mindfulness, kind of what it is, how it can help make a difference, especially for those of us living with chronic health conditions. Not as a fix or cure, of course, because there isn't one, a quick fix, but as a way of helping us to relate to ourselves in a different way, perhaps a more gentle and compassionate way, so that we can bring a bit more ease and balance to our day-to-day. So what we'll cover, I'm going to start with just acknowledging what it's like generally to live with chronic illness. We're going to look at mindfulness, what it is, how it can help, what it looks like in reality, and then I'll finish off by introducing you to an 8-week program that I'm going to be offering in collaboration with Thyroid UK. Not wanting to be all doom and gloom, but I think it is important to acknowledge the actual reality of living with chronic health conditions before talking about a solution. Of course, it's different for everyone, but often it's not just one chronic illness, it's often a collection of them. And these are some familiar, hopefully familiar or common things that can come up. So the first one, fatigue. I'm sure I don't have to tell you, it's not just tiredness. It's, you know, that complete exhaustion which we can feel, which doesn't go away with sleep or rest. Yeah, and it's difficult to deal with and can often then lead to the next one, the guilt and the self-pressure. The kind of inner sense, I guess, that you should be doing more, you should be pushing through. Often not always inner, it can be from external places as well. You know, just get on with things, everyone else is getting on with it. And that can lead to a lot of pressure that we can put on ourselves. Unpredictability and uncertainty. We don't necessarily know how we're going to be feeling from one day to the next, or even one moment to the next. And unpredictability and uncertainty is difficult to deal with in any context, but in the context of our actual health and our capabilities, it's really difficult that we're dealing with, well, all the time. Sometimes there can be some grief and identity shifts depending on when you were diagnosed or well, depending on the person, I suppose, which can look like sort of mourning or feeling an intense grief for the life that you had before, or perhaps the life that you imagined you would have that you know, just can no longer have with the condition that you have now. And then also that goes along with that is identity shifts. Who am I now that my body is working differently, or now that my capabilities are perhaps changed or limited in specific ways? That's a part of living with chronic illness that we sometimes overlook, but I think it's really important to acknowledge. Then I've already mentioned this, but I think it's a big part of pushing through or just getting through. Sometimes when one thing comes after another, and perhaps we have lots of symptoms that are not managed very well by medication or lifestyle, or well, by anything really, we can go into survival mode, where we're just sort of trying to get through the day or the week, or perhaps even the next hour, just really focused on, okay, how am I going to get through this? And that stops us really from living, being in the present and enjoying ourselves. We're so focused on just getting through and surviving. That's a big struggle, I think, living with chronic illness. And then the longer that goes on, the more likely it is to lead to overwhelm and burnout. The longer we spend in fight or flight mode, or survival mode, we could call it, where we're just trying to get through and we're perhaps overwhelmed by what's going on, the more difficult it is to come back out of that, and it can lead to a longer term overwhelm. And on top of that, it's not just mental or emotional factors that lead to the overwhelm and burnout, it's also our bodies. The stress response is a physiological response. So perhaps the same stress before you were unwell wouldn't have pushed you into fight or flight, but now your body is already dealing with many things, so it can easily tip into the stress response, even if you don't feel particularly stressed, mentally or emotionally. And then finally, underneath all of that, there's often, not always, but often a sense of feeling disconnected from your body. Perhaps intentional, because you feel let down or you can't really trust your body. And sometimes it can be dissociating a bit more automatically. But either way, there's often a sense of feeling kind of distant or disconnected from the body, which again makes it more difficult for us to be in the present and really just enjoy living our lives and find moments of peace. Of course, I haven't covered everything here. There's not time to do that, but I hope some of the things I've talked about will resonate with you. And these are the things that we're going to look at, how mindfulness can help. So moving from that situation to living well with chronic illness is something I'm going to talk about next, and that's what mindfulness can help with. Not the only way, I'm sure there are lots of ways, and you probably have your own strategies as well. But for me, mindfulness has just completely changed my life, and that's why I'm sharing it with others now. So living well with chronic illness, of course, again, in the details, it looks different for everyone. But overall, it means moving out of survival mode, out of that mode of just trying to get through each day, and creating more moments of gentleness and ease, and being able to experience moments of joy. Living well also involves rebuilding a trust in our bodies. Although that might sound difficult or distant or out of reach, it is possible. And we can come to recognize that actually our body isn't the enemy, even though it feels like that sometimes. Our bodies are working really hard for us, and they're doing the best they can with what they've got. So coming to accept that helps us to feel more connected and trustful of our bodies. The third one, responding rather than reacting, is a little bit linked to coming out of survival mode. Just creating a bit more space for ourselves and allowing ourselves to pause and breathe before making decisions, so that we're able to choose things that actually benefit us and are the right choices for us, rather than rushing from one thing to the next and trying to get through, which isn't always the best decisions for us personally. Meeting ourselves with compassion. Compassion is absolutely essential in living well with chronic illness. Yeah, I mean, It's really at the core of what I do, the mindfulness that I teach. We have to be kind to ourselves, especially when we're having hard days and things feel more difficult, because that's often the time that our inner critic really comes out and starts really criticizing us and being hard on us, or, you know, why can't you just get on with it, what's wrong with you, that kind of thing. But being able to respond to ourselves with compassion and just acknowledge, yeah, I'm having a really hard day, actually I can't do those things, and that's okay. That really for me was life-changing, and that's a big part of mindfulness. And then finally, being more mindful helps us to become more aware of our needs in the moment, and then not feeling guilty about that, not minimizing them or apologizing for how you're feeling or what's going on for you. And it helps you to start advocating for your needs more effectively with yourself if you need to, but also with your family and friends, your work, if you're working with your doctors, being able to really ask for what you need and not feel, you know, uncomfortable or guilty about that. I'm going to move on now to mindfulness itself, what it is. There are lots of definitions out there of mindfulness, but this is one that I like. It's from Tara Brach, who's a mindfulness teacher as well, and a psychotherapist, I think, or psychologist. So mindfulness is a way of paying attention moment to moment to what's happening within us and around us without judgment. So if we look at the first part, moment to moment, it means when we're practicing mindfulness, we're not thinking about the past or thinking about the future and all the things we've got to do. We're literally just keeping our minds in the present, in the moment, and that's it. Not all the time of your life, but when you're practicing mindfulness, that's what we're doing. And we're noticing what's happening within us as well as what's around us. So within us in terms of how are we feeling in our body? What sensations can we feel? Do we have pain anywhere? Tingling, tension? That kind of thing, but also emotionally and mentally. How are we feeling emotionally? And also, how's our mind? Is it really busy? Is it quite calm? Does it feel very far from us? That sort of thing. That's within us, but also around us. What can we see? What can we hear? Smell, touch, taste? Yeah, and then finally, without judgment. That's often the hardest part, I think, especially for those of us living with chronic illness, thyroid conditions, because we're sort of conditioned to be a little bit hard on ourselves, or maybe dismiss our symptoms and think we should be doing better, or be annoyed about our symptoms. So just being able to accept what's there without judgment is difficult, but it's really powerful when you're able to get there. Before we move on, I think it's worth addressing what mindfulness is not, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions about mindfulness. So firstly, it's not clearing your mind, which I think is the most common misconception. Oh, I'm being mindful because my mind is clear. Actually, you know, our minds are rarely completely clear. We can't control all the time what thoughts are going to pop into our minds or what our minds are going to do, and that's okay, that's natural. Mindfulness just means being aware of that. So perhaps noticing, oh, my mind is really busy today, I'm having lots of negative thoughts today, or I'm really stuck in the past at the moment in my mind, or perhaps my mind is really calm today. It's just noticing what's there rather than trying to change it. And the second one sorry, is that mindfulness is only practiced through sitting and meditating. Yes, while it's true, meditation is mindfulness, and you know, it doesn't have to be sitting, can be lying down, can be standing. That's true, but it's not the only way to practice mindfulness. Actually, mindfulness can be practiced in many different ways, and it depends on the person. We're going to look at what mindfulness actually looks like in the moment. But excuse me a minute. It could be taking a walk and really just paying attention to the feeling of walking, to the sound of the birds, the breeze, feeling the breeze on your skin. Or it could be day-to-day things like making a cup of tea or something, spending time with loved ones and laughing and connecting, really being in the moment. any time where you're just in the moment and you're paying attention to what's going on. That's mindfulness. The next point is about forcing positivity. I think there's a misconception that mindfulness means, you know, just accept everything and be happy with everything. Look for the positive, don't be negative. That's really not mindfulness at all. And that's really important to say, especially for chronic health conditions, because we're dealing with a lot, and it is completely unrealistic to think that we're going to be positive all the time. Mindfulness actually just means acknowledging what's there. So maybe you are having a hard day, maybe you're feeling really sad or angry or disappointed. Paying attention to that is mindfulness, making space for that emotion. You know, I'm having a difficult day, I'm feeling really frustrated because I wanted to do this, that and the other, but I can't because I'm too fatigued. I feel really disappointed. Then we can acknowledge that. What does it feel like to be disappointed? And we can ask, what can we do to support ourselves in this feeling? And make some choices that are actually going to be compassionate and calming for ourselves, rather than pushing it away and thinking, oh, I should be feeling fine, or look for the positive, it could be worse. That's something I hear a lot of the time. So yeah, I just want to be really clear about that. It's not about forcing positivity at all. It's just about noticing what's there. And in the same way, it's not ignoring your symptoms and just getting on with it, or thinking, you know, things could be worse, or accepting your symptoms without seeking help. Obviously, we need help, we need medication, we need doctors, and our symptoms can be really horrible at times. But mindfulness can support us in kind of accepting the things that we can't change, and being okay with who we are and what we're experiencing, the things that we can't change, but also knowing what we can change. So making sure that we're aware of when we can ask for help and when we need to, you know, ask a doctor or friends for help, or family. Not just accepting everything that we're given and being happy with it. That's not mindfulness at all. So mindfulness and chronic illness, how does it help? I've covered a lot of these points already, but I just thought I'd add in an extra slide. So the mind-body connection, helping you to feel more comfortable in your body and build a more trusting relationship with your body, mainly because we have to. This is the only body we've got, and it's much nicer to be in a body that you feel comfortable in. Self-acceptance, that's a huge one, especially, as I've mentioned it before, but I'm going to say it again, especially with health conditions, chronic health conditions. We don't want to feel like we have to justify everything or minimize our feelings and say it's fine when it's not. So through mindfulness, we can accept ourselves and just feel comfortable saying, no, I can't do that, I'm not feeling well, without having to explain and feel stressed or guilty about it. The nervous system support, I've mentioned a lot, helping us to come out of the fight or flight or the stress response and calm everything down in our system, so that we can build resilience, which is also here, and that we're not always rushing or fighting or, you know, on autopilot. We've got some more space for ourselves, and that helps then with the self-care and pacing. We become more aware of how we're feeling. That means we can become more aware of what we need, when we need to pause, when we're okay to push ourselves a little bit, and what we need in terms of self-care. Self-compassion, I'm not going to go on about that anymore. That's a huge one. And then the last one, resilience. And again, resilience, not in the sense of, you know, not being affected by things or just getting on with it, but in the sense of, you know, being able to process difficult experiences and not spend a long time in fight or flight, but be able to process them and come back finding some ease and calm. So what does it actually look like? Talked a little bit about this already as well. Can involve meditation. You can be mindful when you're moving. I think moving, for me, moving is amazing, and it really helps to calm down my body. Even when my mind's racing, I can just calm down my body, which could just be walking, it could be stretching. If that feels too much sometimes, even just swaying like side to side a little bit, or circles on your chest can feel nice. Any movement where you're really just paying attention to the movement, like what body parts are you moving? What can you feel? Can you feel warmth or tingling or well, any sensations that you feel is mindfulness practice. The everyday activities like making a cup of tea, I think a really helpful or easy one to start with is taking a shower or washing your face. The smell of the soap, the feel of the water, the sound of the water. It can be a really nice grounding practice that doesn't take very long. Pausing and just taking a breath, perhaps just one breath or 3 breaths, counting 1, 2, 3 as you breathe. That can be really helpful, especially on hard days. Remembering to pause a few times during the day and just breathe can really slow everything down. Even 3 breaths can feel like really calming and relaxing. Checking in with ourselves is also part of mindfulness practice. And again, I think really important, especially for chronic illness, where we just ask ourselves, okay, pause, even 30 seconds, just pause. How am I feeling? How's my body? How's my emotions? How's my heart? And how's my mind? What do I need? And then finally, using our senses. This can be really helpful. You might have already heard of it, especially when you're in fight or flight, but counting 5 things, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, and then smell and taste and touch. That can be really grounding, just to bring you back into the present if you're spiraling a little bit or feeling very anxious. And then finally, hopefully I'm going to finish on time, is the mindfulness program. So I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to provide a mindfulness program in collaboration with Thyroid UK. It's a combination of the MBCT and MBSR, if you're familiar with mindfulness. So there's the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy and mindfulness-based stress reduction. So the course that I'm offering is a combination of both of those. So not specifically for stress, not specifically for depression, but it's a combination of both. And it's taking those approaches which are evidence-based, showing that they do have positive effects. And some of those studies include focus on long-term health conditions, in reporting that participants have had reduced stress and increased or more positive reports of quality of life, reduced pain perception. Anyway, not going to go on for ages, but that's the course, and it's going to take place over 8 weeks with one 90-minute session a week, with a 10-minute break in the middle. I'm not going to expect anyone to sit for 90 minutes, and it involves practice tasks and audio recordings. So there's some home practice in between sessions, and really from the feedback anyway, the most beneficial, valuable part of the program is that it's a small group. The maximum is 18 people, but usually in the group, as many people can't come every single week, there's about 12 people in the group, and everyone in the group has a thyroid condition. So it's a space where you're with other people who know what you're going through and who get it, and you're learning together and practicing together, coming each week. You might have had a difficult week, and that's fine. You might have similar problems. You might be able to support each other. It's just a really lovely space. And really that's the selling point. It's different from practicing on your own or trying to learn in a group that's not specifically thyroid related, where you can feel like your experience is a bit invisible if people don't really get it. That's the course if you're interested. I've forgotten how much we've said it was now, but it's very, very reduced in price, and it does include a donation to Thyroid UK. I think Lynn is going to post a link to the webpage, so if you're interested, you can have a look and sign up. If you've got any other questions, you can just reach out to me. Oh yeah, I don't know if there's time for questions because I've gone 1 minute over. I'm going to stop talking. I think my mind is drifting now and I'm just talking rubbish. So I'm stopping now. Thank you so much.
Don't worry. Don't worry. Honestly, it was brilliant. It was really good. As for the cost, it's £40 per person for the full 8-week course, which I think is really competitive. And Thyroid UK will be receiving some of that to help us keep going. So thank you very much, Lisa, for that. I don't think there are any questions as such. Nikki has put the link for the booking of the course. And people are saying, thank you, Lisa, you were brilliant. So
Thank you.
That's really good. Okay, so thank you very much, Lisa. That was really good. That was really good. I must say, I do some breathing sometimes when I get stressed. I breathe in, but then breathe out a bit longer, an extended breath out, just 3 or 4 times, and that really helps. I also use lavender oil if I get really stressed. That helps me with the breathing of it in and out. So yeah, I find that really good. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
So has anybody got any general questions just for me here? Okay, Lisa, can you still hear? She's someone has said, I can't make the last 2 weeks of the mindfulness course. Can I be sent a recording of missed meetings?
Okay. Well, actually, I can't record the sessions because some of the things people share, they'd rather be kept confidential. But you will receive a copy of the slides, a recording of all the meditations we've done, and documents for home practice and activities. All of those materials will be shared, but the actual sessions are not recorded.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think that's everything. It's just really a call for donations if you really enjoyed today, if you enjoyed what you've seen today. As I said earlier, there's only 3 of us here. And what we like to do with these, if they're being recorded, is to send them to an outside organisation to edit and make it look much better and go more smoothly. And that costs money, obviously. So if you could send just a small donation, even £1 would help. You can either do it by going up to the donate button that's on every page of our website, or you can text thyroid to 70085 to donate £3. So we would be very grateful. And it will help keep us running and doing the campaigning that we're doing all the time. Okay, so if you do have any queries or anything, this is the email address that you can send an email to, and I'll answer the questions if I can. I hope you really enjoyed today and learnt from it as well. I know I have. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And I hope to see you again at our next get-together if you are a member. If you're not a member, do join, because you get magazines. You get 3 magazines a year with sort of lots of nutritional articles in there, updates, news, thyroid news, and there'll be news in there about the PSP and the T3 campaign. But it all helps funding us to be able to keep us going. If not, join our e-news, which is free, and that goes out whenever I have time, because we are so busy here.